Achtung, Achtung, hier ist Alex Wright, and you are listening to Chat, Grapple, and Cheat Pops with JB and Chris Dredd. Enjoy it, or I come over and kick your ass.
Welcome, everyone, and welcome to another very special episode of Chat, Grapple, and Cheat Pops podcast. I am Chris Dredd. I'm here with my main man, JB, and today we've got a very special guest. We are here with an author, and he has written such books as Pro Wrestling Frequently Asked Questions, WWE Legends, The Ultimate World Wrestling Entertainment Trivial Book, and Blood and Fire, his new book that has just come out. And we are here with the brilliant Brian R. Solomon.
All right. You used the middle initial. Thank you. Perfect.
No worries.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me on, guys.
No worries, man. It's a pleasure. I mean, to be honest, we haven't actually had an author on that isn't a wrestler. So we have had wrestlers on and interviewed them that have written books. The likelihood of them actually writing the book themselves is pretty fucking minimal. We've had a few guys on that have said, oh, we are writing a book, or we want to write a book, or we're in the process of kind of putting bits and bobs together. But you are a fully fledged author. Written from everything from Godzilla all the way through to your more recent book, which is about the original Sheik, Blood and Fire, the unbelievable real life story of wrestling's original Sheik. So, yeah, man, do you tell us a little bit about yourself and, you know, what you're doing at the minute and the new book?
Well, you know, to tie into what you were just saying, that is a pattern with wrestling books, and it's, you know, it's just the way it is, where what we've seen is the majority of wrestling biographies that come out are autobiographies, where it's the actual subject of the book who's writing his or her own book, or, you know, with a ghostwriter or whatever. And those are great, but there are many really good ones, but there's a difference between that and an independent biography by a writer or a journalist or somebody that's really trying to tell an unbiased story where it's not intended to, you know, get anybody over or line anybody's pockets or anything. It's just a work of, you know, nonfiction journalism or whatever. And there's not a lot of those. There's the Buddy Rogers one that came out by Tim Hornbaker recently. And there was, of course, the Andre the Giant one that Pat LaPrade and Bertrand Hébert did. And so this book to me is, I'm trying to do something in that vein, where it's a biography of a major wrestling superstar, the original Sheik, that's never been done. And so I have a background in writing first and foremost. I love wrestling. I've loved wrestling since I was 12 years old. And, you know, I was a wrestling fan before I was a writer. But my main thing is I am a professional writer. I've been a professional writer for 25 years. If wrestling didn't exist, forbid, knock on wood, but if it did not, I would still be a professional writer. I'd just be writing about other things. So I'm trying to apply that to wrestling. And like, I actually care. The facts are great, and doing research is very important. There are probably people out there who are even better at that than I am. But it's also important that the book is readable. that it's enjoyable, that you can enjoy it as a book. And even like what I try to strive for with my books is, even if you didn't like wrestling, let's say, or you didn't know who the Sheik was, or you don't watch wrestling, you may still find this book enjoyable to read, because I really tried my best to write it very well. So I think that's different from what a lot of wrestling books are.
I will interject just quickly. You are also the host of Shut Up and Wrestle, which is on the Arcadian Vanguard network. I hope I got that right.
You did.
Yeah.
Arcadian Vanguard. It sounds like I've been playing Magic the Gathering cards all weekend, but it just sounds like something from Magic the Gathering, Arcadian Vanguard.
Yeah, I have to ask, you know, Brian Last, that's his network, and he's best known for the Jim Cornette Experience and the Cornette Drive-Through podcasts, which are like the two biggest podcasts in wrestling. And I have to ask him what Arcadian Vanguard means. I've often wondered myself, but that's the name of his network. And he asked me, to be on that. I was starting to I was on his show, the 605 Super Podcast, and I was on Cornette's show, and I had been thinking of doing a podcast for the longest time. It was in the back of my head because, I used to work for WWE, and, I have a lot of these strange experiences and things, and I know a lot of people. I can get good guests. And so after the Cornette thing, I thought, well, this might be a good time to try to do it. Like, people know who I am, and there's a listenership, and I was going to do it independently because I never imagined anybody would care about it enough to say, let me help you. And he reached out to me immediately to ask me to do it as a part of his network. And I was like, oh my God, like I would have pitched it to you directly if I thought you actually would wanted to do that. I never even flattered myself. So it's cool because it's a great platform. There's great exposure. There's a built-in audience there. It's like a satellite of what he and Cornette are doing in a weird way. And so, it got the show off to a really hot start. It's an old school themed wrestling podcast where every week I have a different guest. And so what the topic is will depend on who the guest is. So like I had Blue Meanie on there, and we talked about, not only ECW, we talked about his being a fan as a kid in the 80s. And I had Stu Sachs on there, who was the publisher of Pro Wrestling Illustrated magazine for decades. So we could talk about stuff like that. And it all depends on who the guest is. I just had RVD on a couple of weeks ago to coincide with the release of the book, because RVD was trained by the Sheik. And so we could talk about Detroit wrestling and the Sheik and things like that. And so, it's been a no-brainer for me. It's been a lot of fun.
It's crazy. So you mentioned Pro Wrestling Illustrated. So you used to work for them as well, right? And WWE. Were you an editor for WWF at one point?
Yes, I was with WWF/WWE for 7 years, from 2000 to 2007. I worked in their magazine department. So WWE Magazine, Raw Magazine, SmackDown Magazine, all the special magazines like the Divas and Hardy Boys and all that stuff. I worked on all that stuff. And since I left WWE in 2007, I had been contributing freelance because, all the PWI writers are freelance. They don't really have a staff like they used to in the Bill Apter glory days. But I've contributed articles to them since 2007. But in the past 2 years, I would say, since the pandemic, when I've been able to focus more on my freelance writing, I've been a regular contributor every issue to PWI, where I have columns in there and I do features for them. So I'm a regular contributor to their magazine, which I love, because I've been reading that magazine since I was a teenager.
See, I wasn't a PWI guy. I was a Power Slam guy, and that was
Wow.
Power Slam was one that was done here in the UK, and it was I have countless. I can't see them from here, but they're stacked up. I have a lot of those magazines from the 2000s from the WWE as well, the WWF, like those special ones, like there was a Hulkamania special, and
so the Hulkamania special was that came out in 2002 when right after he had the match with The Rock at WrestleMania, where all of a sudden they realized that we're wasting our time having him be NWO Hogan. Like, we need to go back to the red and yellow and have him be, a huge baby face. And that magazine was to capitalize on that. And that became the first magazine that I was given to run. So that one's very special to me, because I had been just like a staff writer for 2 years before they said, you know what, we're going to start letting you edit magazines. Before we give you the monthly magazine to run, which they did, they gave me the Hulkamania special as a trial run to see what I would do. So that magazine was my baby. I conceptualized everything in there. Everything that's in that magazine was devised by me. And we did the photo shoots. We went down to his house in Tampa or Clearwater area. If you have that issue, we did like.
I'm fucking honored I have it now. So
I was in his office with him, shooting those pictures when he's got all the belts on his desk and everything. Like that was all me saying like, yeah, get all the belts. Oh my God, you actually have the Rocky III belt, the Thunder Lips belt. Yeah, put that on the desk. Like I was involved with doing all that stuff. So that one, I love that issue. I love it.
Man,
that's wrapped in plastic on the shelf. That's
good,
yeah,
as it should be.
Yeah,
with the black cover, right? But
yeah, that's the one.
He's in the tie dye. I fought really hard because they wanted a white background, and I said no. He will pop. Those colors will pop against a black background better than white. And they were like, what does this kid know? He's 20 whatever years old. He never ran a magazine before. I'm in Shane McMahon's office with the publisher, who's my boss. And I'm going, please, please, please give me a black cover. So now every time I look at it, I go like, yes, I won. I got the friggin' black cover. Yes.
Man, that was a great era for the magazine, man. I swear there was a lot of magazines released with like figures on the front as well. There was like I don't know if the Kurt Angle one might have been 1999, maybe. It might have been a little bit earlier.
Yes, so that was right before I got there. I know what you're talking about. But we would do foil covers, variant covers. We would do like where there'd be like mini magazines inside or trading cards. We were doing a lot of that stuff. That was partly because, the reality of it was that even back then at that time, magazines were starting to decline, in sales and things, and the internet was really hurting. And so we were trying to think of ways to get people's attention. We would have collectible multiple covers. Like when we did the 10th anniversary of Monday Night Raw, which was a Raw magazine, we had variant covers with different collages. We had 4 different covers, where like one was like Austin and McMahon, and another one was like Mick Foley and The Rock, and another one was Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, and like just different eras of Raw. But it was just intended to try to help sales.
So, from what I can gather, Vince Russo he started off working as an editor on the magazine. Is that right?
Yeah. Not only did he start that way, but even when he was booking TV and the head creative writer, he was still technically the publisher and editor-in-chief of the magazines.
Right.
He had other people handling it. Like at that point, Kevin Kelly was kind of his right-hand man on the magazines, and Dennis Brent was there. And he was still involved, but not as directly anymore. But he started in the magazines because he had a radio show. So he was running a video store in New York where he would get wrestlers coming in for autograph signings. And that started the relationship where he became friends with John Arezzi, who had a wrestling radio show. Arezzi started having him on. Russo took over the radio show and he started booking WWF talent. And then eventually he got his way into the company that way. He knew a guy in the magazines called Ed Ricciuti, who was the editor of the magazines. And Ed knew Vince because of the talent sharing thing of having, and promoting the magazine. And he brought him on the staff of the magazine. And then he pushed Ed Ricciuti out too. And he took over WWF magazine. And, it just kept spiraling and spiraling from there. Now, I actually got my job there because of his leaving. When he left to go to WCW and in late 99, and he took a lot of the staff with him, and he took some magazine people with him and stuff. And so the magazines then fell to someone called Barry Werner, who had been brought in to help. He was a New York Daily News sports editor. So he was pretty respected guy at the time. And he took over and he tried to kind of restaff the magazine and put his stamp on it. Like he moved out Kevin, Kelly, and Dennis and people that Vince had, that Russo had, and he wanted to have some outside people in, and I was one of those people. So I wound up getting in there because Russo left.
That's kind of why I asked, because I thought that Russo might have been hanging around until the late 90s and you coming in like early 2000s. So I thought there might have been some kind of, crossing of paths or anything. But
first time I went in for an interview was October 1999. And he had left like weeks before that. It was the day the company went public. I'll never forget that. The day of this public offering of stock, October 1999. And I went in for a couple of different interviews, and I finally got the job, and I started on Valentine's Day 2000.
Wow.
And Russo was long gone by then. In fact, when I was there starting, it was an interesting time because all the people on the magazine staff that had been there, they all knew him. And a lot of them were friends with him. Some of them hated him, but they were all buzzing because now he's on Nitro and he's booking the show and he's on television, which he had never been for WWF. And all these people I worked with are like, oh my God, look at Vince. What is he doing? I can't believe it. He's on TV and all this stuff. And they were watching closely to see what he would do. And at the time, we laugh now to think of it, but there was real fear of like, what is going to happen? Like, is this going to be a turning point now? It was a turning point, but the turning point was it killed WCW. We thought it was going to be a different kind of turning point. And there was definitely some concern.
That's
Crazy.
incredible. That's actually a real concern that WCW were turning it around when they were dipping further and further into the mire at that point. It's
a lot of people didn't realize at the time, I think, and I say all this as somebody who has never met Vince Russo, and I would love to, and I don't want to talk out of turn or talk about someone that I didn't know personally, but my understanding of it was that what worked so well was the chemistry between him and Vince McMahon. That Vince, had been, even though Vince was always a very edgy, kind of ballsy kind of guy, but his booking and his ideas were very conservative. And Russo came along and was like, let's just do all this crazy shit. Like it was stuff that I think McMahon had always wanted to do, but he never thought it would work or it wouldn't have a market. He had a family-friendly product. And when Russo came along and was doing Raw Magazine, and the tone of Raw Magazine was like the tone that Vince wanted on his television show, that it gave him the impetus to say, yeah, let's actually do this. And so Russo would come up with crazy ideas, and sometimes he would get reined in by Vince and by McMahon, and they would balance each other. So then when he went to WCW, it was almost like people just thought he was somehow magical, like just his presence there would fix everything. But what they didn't realize it was complicated. And so when he goes over there and now he's unrestrained and he's won this war, this political battle with Eric Bischoff and all this other stuff, and he's allowed to do whatever he wants, that's when it's a problem, because there was no one on the other end of the seesaw, so it just went off the rails.
That's crazy. Have you ever thought about booking wrestling yourself?
No.
You don't want any part of that, no?
No. Well, because I'll tell you, I would never do it independently because I don't want to lose all of my money, number one. And as far as inside the company, I can tell you that when I worked there would be lots of times where they would be looking for new people to join the creative writing team. And a lot of times they would turn to the magazine and be like, hey, Stephanie's looking for new writers. Anybody interested? That happened lots of times. And I would always say, no way, not doing it. And there were some people that did do it because, look, the turnaround and the burnout. I knew if I did that, I'd be gone in 3 months. I just knew it. I would be done. Whereas if I stayed where I was, I had a good chance of having a longer career, even though I'm not there anymore. But I feel very confident that I was right to do that. I didn't want to be anywhere near it. It's like orbiting too close to the sun,
So when you wrote the books, the Legends of WWE and the other WWE book, the trivia one, is it?
The trivia book.
Yeah. So were you working for WWE at that time?
I was. Yeah, I was. The trivia book was something that, I don't even remember how that came about, but it was a group of people. It was me. It was Kevin Kelly. It was another magazine writer named Aaron Williams. And a web writer named Phil Spear. I think I'm not leaving anybody out. And we all just got together. I think Kevin Kelly kind of spearheaded it, maybe, where he was like, let's do this trivia thing. Because I had done, I was doing these random little projects for them. Like there was a WWF trivia game in the 90s. At least there was in America. I don't know if you had it over there, but
Right.
it was put out by a company called Pressman. And I wrote the trivia card questions for that game, for a later edition of that game, like hundreds and hundreds of questions. And that's, I think, so Kevin was like, well, why don't we could like turn that into a book. Like that could be, but it would be partly because WWF had the publishing deal with Simon and Schuster in the United States back then, where they had to put out a book a month. Okay. And so that's all well and good when you have like, oh, Mick Foley's got a new book, or here's The Rock's book, here's Chyna's book, you know?
Yeah.
But there's some months where it was like, what are we going to do? There's nothing. And so they were like, hey, let's get these bunch of writers to do a trivia book. Like that's literally how it would happen.
Wow.
And that's how WWE Legends happened too. They needed a filler book for that month, you know?
So that doesn't give you a lot of time to like put together a book, you know, edit it and, you know, compile it, edit it.
No, we didn't have to do it in a month, but
Right,
they would
right.
say like they, you know, let's say it's like July 2000, and they would go, okay, this book is going to be the February 2001 book. You're slotted in
Okay.
for February 2001. That's going to be the book. So get it ready by then. Like it would be like that.
So they would have gaps in the schedule where they would have stuff obviously, you know, mapped out, but then they're like, oh shit, in 6 months' time we've got a month that we've got nothing. Let's do this.
Right. And I think, and look, the only way, because I've thought about it lots of times, the only reason that they greenlit the WWE Legends book was because of that. They were desperate. Like, because I had this idea when I worked there. Back then, they were not doing anything historical. They really weren't. Today, they do much more historical stuff. You know, this was before they brought the Hall of Fame back. This was before not only the network, but WWE 24/7 on demand. Before any of that stuff, there was really nothing happening. And I pitched this idea to do a trading card set, with the idea being legends, like old timers, without using the term old timers. But the idea that I had was very specific. I wanted to focus on the stars from the pre-national expansion of WWF, like before WrestleMania and Hulk Hogan, and before, when it was still just a territory. Wow. The stars of, you know, from the late 50s into the early 80s, to focus on them, because they never really got the love, especially in that era, like you know, Antonino Rocca and Bruno Sammartino and Buddy Rogers and Ivan Putski and Ivan Koloff and those kind of people. I wanted to do that, and it's transformed from a trading card set into a book. And it became, because they were like, oh, you know what? This could be a book, because we need a book in this particular month. So let's make it as a book. There is no way that they would have ever gone for a book like that if they didn't desperately need something for a particular month. They would have just been like, why are we doing a book about this? Why do we care about this? You know, I just know it. You know, that's what helped push that book through.
Well, I've actually got one of the cards here. I think it's one of the WWF Legends. It's Jimmy Garvin.
That came later, yeah.
That was, I think, 2007-ish. So,
right, and the book came out in 2006. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this one's signed as well by Jimmy Garvin, but yeah, man, trust me. So, do you think that kind of maybe pushed them to think, hold on a minute, there is a bit of a market. People are a bit hungry for the retrospective look at the business.
I do, because it also coincided with the WWE Legends program, which they started, where they would give Legends contracts to people. When they brought the Hall of Fame back, they created a whole logo, like the logos on that card you just showed me.
That's right. Yeah.
And I was very lucky, because what I pitched, the title of the book that I pitched was originally, it was going to be called Legends of the WWF, right? So then it became Legends of WWE. And I was very lucky because then the Legends program started, where the WWE Legends program, and they were like, hey, what if we call the book WWE Legends, and it will tie directly in with the Legends program. And I think it might have been the first time the logo was even used, because it's used on the cover of the book. It's basically used as the title of the book on the cover. And that helped get the ball rolling too, because I can tell you that I had the book finished in 2003. It was done. I wrote it in 6 months in 2003, and it just sat around until 2006. And I think it was because they were getting that program running, and because they were waiting for an open month. And when they finally got an open month that they considered was so unimportant that they could put my book in it, that's when WWE Legends finally came out. That was my first book.
That's crazy. I mean, and look at how huge, and really is huge, the Hall of Fame is now. Really, it is.
Yeah.
You know, at the time of WrestleMania, it's absolutely huge. I mean, I've always been a fan of it. I mean, my favorite. I mean, there's a few good years where they had a few good people, but I think you must have been working for them at the time. Mine was 2004, just strictly for Bobby the Brain Heenan. But that whole class of 2004 that were inducted that year was a fantastic year for Legends, basically. I don't know if you remember much about that.
Yeah, well, Bobby Heenan, a lot of people say that was the greatest induction speech of all time, and they might be right. You know, it was. A lot of people forget that in the beginning, the Hall of Fame was a very inside thing. It was a dinner. It was just a banquet for the company. And there might have been a handful of tickets sold and fans, but it was really just for them. It was an inside thing. And then when they brought it back, which I think was 03 or 04, that year you mentioned, in the beginning, it was still kind of that, where it was just kind of for the boys, and you could tell that it was, and they had like limited seats. But then it slowly but surely, as it got tied to WrestleMania, it became more like a TV show for the fans, more than it was even for the boys anymore. It was something a little bit different. You could just see that transformation that happened, where it became a TV show, you know, where in the beginning, it wasn't really treated that way. It was treated like a dinner or a function where they just happen to have cameras rolling, you know, recording it, you know.
I was at the 2008 Hall of Fame for the longest speech of all time. And yeah, that was something else.
Which one was that? Because there've been a lot of those.
Ric Flair. Rick was told to get off stage at least 3 times by Triple H. Triple H had to keep coming out. Yeah, it was really something else. It was something special. It was hilarious. But like, yeah,
I remember there've been a few like that. Like, I remember when the Blackjacks went in, that Blackjack Lanza talked for like an hour or something crazy.
Shit.
Some of these were, because I think that might have been one of the ones where it was the banquet, so there was less control. I was there as a fan, I went in later years to the 2013 one in Madison Square Garden because I wanted to see Bruno Sammartino go in. And they had Bob Backlund on stage, who, for whatever reason, I wish he didn't choose to do this, but he was in character for his induction speech as crazy Mr. Bob Backlund. And they had to send Kane with his entrance music and everything. Kane come on stage and pull Bob Backlund off the stage, which was sad because it was like, this was a man who was in the building where he sold out for years on end as the world champion, and kids loved him and everything. And now he's, I don't know, that was a little sad. But, you know, the Hall of Fame is known for these really long, meandering speeches. I thought the only one, you know, like the Undertaker one really worked for me because it was very well done. And I was like, you know what? I don't mind them letting this guy talk as long as he wants. Like he's earned that. And it's not just some rambling, you know, nonsense. Like, it's a very well thought out speech. I thought it was great.
It would be sort of remiss to bring not ask this question, but I saw a tweet from you the other day. You mentioned Impact and talking about their numbers. Like, I'd like to ask you how you feel about the current state of, you know, the top 3 promotions in the US right now, like, and see how you feel, because we have our own opinions on companies, so Chris in particular, but
I love TNA stroke
yeah,
Impact
I know you love
Wrestling.
TNA and Impact,
I
but it's
do.
the other one. It's the other one I was talking
I
about.
have been a huge fan of Impact Wrestling and TNA for many years, but I saw Josh Alexander saying something about AEW kind of coming in and picking a load of people and stuff. So it is a quite a strange time, but an exciting time. And yeah, what are your thoughts on it at the minute?
Well, you'll notice in the tweet you're mentioning, at the beginning of it, I even said, I'm not even counting the actual quality of the show, because I know, like,
Yeah, that's right.
I don't watch it religiously, but I know people that will tell me that it's actually pretty damn good if you sit down and give it a chance.
Yeah.
Not even counting that. I mean, I understand that, but even just looking at their numbers at this point, it's like, I don't even understand why they would still be on, because like WrestleMania night 1 had more people in the audience than the amount of people that watch Impact on television. I'm not even exaggerating, on any given week. If you could fit your entire TV viewership into a building, that's not good. So I'm going, how is this allowed? And then of course people say, well, don't you know that they're owned by the same company that owns the network? Yes, I know that.
Yeah.
I'm still saying, why? That makes it even more confusing. If I own a network and I own this product that I'm airing on my network and no one's watching it, I'm going to take it off my network, even if I own it. I'm going to say, can we maybe put infomercials on there? Can somebody pay us to put programming on there? Why are we, that even the fact that Anthem owns Access TV doesn't, to me, sufficiently explain why Impact is still on the air. And I don't mean that to be snarky. It's just when you look at their numbers and you go, if this was any other TV show, there's no way it would still be on. Not only still on, but 20 years of bouncing around from network to network and owner to owner. How is this even happening? It's almost like they have some weird like deal with the devil or something. Some weird thing has happened. Like, I don't even know, you mentioned like the top 3 companies. I'm not even sure half the time if I would even call them number 3.
4, yeah.
I think you can make an argument in the US that possibly the NWA could be considered number 3.
Yeah. Ring of Honor now, maybe as
Ring
well.
of Honor,
I'd
but
say
Ring of Honor,
GCWs might be there.
GCW.
You know what? You're right. Forget, I love NWA, but you're right. GCW is number 3 right now. I have no doubt in my mind. GCW is number 3. So Impact might be number 5, which is, nuts. And you've got Ring of Honor is a tough one, because especially right now, calling Ring of Honor its own company is like calling NXT its own company. You know what I mean? It's NXT is WWE with a different brand on it, and Ring of Honor is now AEW with a different brand on it. That's so it's, if you're going by brands, yes, but if you're going by actual different companies, Ring of Honor no longer is its own company,
It's a shame, because Impact Wrestling and TNA, for the longest time, they've always, like you say, they've bounced around from this network to this one, and Access TV is just a weird one to have it on. They've always been like a really hard company to watch or to find where they are. They've never, I mean, in the UK, we had a channel called Bravo, right? And it started at like, I don't know if you had a program. It was like, used to show kids TV. It was in America called Trouble.
Maybe, I don't know.
It was called Trouble. So Trouble, it used to play like fucking, Hanging with Mr. Cooper, like Saved by the Bell, The New Class, and all this kind of shit.
We have like Nickelodeon or the Disney Channel and things like that show that stuff.
It was similar kind of stuff. So we had it in the UK, and it was called Trouble. And then around 6 or 7 o'clock, it would turn off, and it would change into Bravo, and then it would have like kind of laddish kind of culture on there. So it was like like cars and like weird crap like that, and TNA was on there. So it was on Bravo. So the pay-per-views were on there. The weekly TV Impact, which was obviously what their weekly TV show was called before they rebranded and called the show itself Impact. So it was really weird. I mean, and that was a free cable channel. It's weird, but then for years after that, it's just been here and there and on.
I honestly don't know what channel it's on in the UK right now.
When I made that tweet, somebody responded, and it really is so perfect. They called Impact the zombie wrestling promotion because it's like they're dead, but they keep moving and they keep existing even though they're dead. It's very strange. Strange company.
It is crazy how they're still going. I mean, we've even commented, haven't we, on the podcast, like, how is TNA? I always call it fucking TNA, but how is Impact Wrestling still surviving? I mean,
is Ted Turner secretly running Anthem or something? Is this what we're going to find out?
A higher power. No, but and when I say things like that, I think sometimes people take it the wrong way, because right now you have this very like clannish, cliquish, like tribalist
it's horrific
version of wrestling, where it's like, I'm a fan of this company and I like this company and I can't like your company and I hope you fail and blah blah blah. Now, I come from an era, I grew up watching wrestling in the 80s, where even though the territories were dying, you had Crockett Promotions, you had the AWA struggling along, you had Memphis, and you had World Class still trying to do things, and there were things happening. And you were, you might have a company you preferred, or it was your local whatever, but you were a wrestling fan. You bought a wrestling magazine and you wanted to learn about the other stuff that you didn't get to see. And, you were a fan of what we would then call the sport of pro wrestling. You didn't think in terms of brands. This is something that WWE has really worked hard to create and market and establish, and it's now been internalized. So like, you have fans now that they're just fans of a brand. So when I say something like, how is TNA still on the air? How is Impact still? I'm not saying it because I want Impact to fail, or I'm being snarky and saying, oh, aren't they terrible? Look at this show. I'm saying it from a business point of view.
It's an observation. Yeah.
Right. I'm reading the Observer. He's giving the numbers year over year. And I'm going, 55,000 people watched it. 55,000 people. Like they're not missing any zeros there. That's how many people watched it. It was a 0.03 rating. And I'm just going, how are they still on TV? Not because I don't want them to be on TV. Yeah. It's an observation, like you said.
More people watch a single football game in the UK,
literally,
in one stadium for that.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, we've got like 60,000, 70,000 in upward stadium. Someone will go and watch a football game on the weekend with that much. It's insane, actually. I mean, it's just because I think they've almost. I don't know how involved Dixie Carter is and that in it anymore. I've really lost touch with it. But in the past, people obviously were saying, look, she had a bottomless pit of money, literally was just shoveling fucking dollars into it.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is, so I almost, again, like you say, it's amazing to think they're still going and how it's possible. They must have some kind of Faustian deal that they've, someone shook someone's hoof and that's it. It's fucking, we will never die.
Yeah, it's like Black Phillip and the Witch, just some kind of weird deal has been struck to live deliciously in Impact.
It's so sad though, really, because you think about I mean, as you can see, I've got figures behind me, fucking loads of them, but in front of me is like my TNA Impact wall, and you've got people like Samoa Joe, Kurt Angle, AJ Styles, Sting was there for a long time. There's some real good talent that's come through there. Eric Young, Elijah Burke when he was, the Pope D'Angelo De Niro and all this kind of stuff. Bobby Lashley was there for many, many years.
Should have got more ratings. Yeah.
Not only was Bobby Lashley there for years, but he reinvented himself there. You would not be seeing the run he's having right now in WWE if it wasn't for what he did in Impact. He would have 100%. Just been a forgettable WWE also ran from the 2000s. Like he made himself into a legit superstar and then came back a bigger star than he was, which by the way, also Drew McIntyre did too.
Yeah, Drew McIntyre did. AJ Styles literally made his career in Impact Wrestling. Like you say, yeah, Bobby Lashley. It's happened numerous times to guys that they've gone to Impact or TNA and they've been able to kind of rejuvenate themselves there. But now, like you say, it's not even a fourth, fifth, almost sixth string company at the moment, which is because they've got some good talent there. You know, they really have. But
yeah,
no one fucking watches. Sad.
No. And I mean, look, I don't really watch it. And I mean, I'm somebody that tries to keep on top of everything, but I don't have the channel that they're on. But I mean, there's still ways to watch it if I really wanted to, obviously.
Sure.
I'm not motivated to put that effort in every week. And like, it's just, I watch NWA most of the time. I actually have a subscription because they're on Fight TV over here. And I have a subscription to their package where I pay to watch it because I think it's worthwhile, or at least more worthwhile than watching Impact. But that's my own personal preference. Like and like many other people, they just lost me over the years when you're from changing networks and going on all different times and changing their name and just all this crazy stuff going on. You lose a lot of people that way, and I'm one of those people.
I mean, Flair and Hogan were there. Bischoff was there.
I was at Bound for Glory 2011 in Philadelphia, where it was Hulk Hogan's final American match.
Wow.
And it was him against Sting.
Yeah.
Where he turned babyface. Hogan was the heel, and he turned face at the end because I guess it was Flair. Flair was in Hogan's corner as a heel, and then Flair turned on him and started beating him down, and Sting saved Hogan, and then Hogan went out on top as a face. I was there that night. That was a great show, actually.
They really have put on some good shows. They used to come to England. They used to come do a UK tour, and it was pretty good, man. The shows were pretty decent.
Yeah, because I think Hogan had his very, very final matches over there for TNA, the tag team match. He did a couple of tag team matches over there.
Yeah.
And they were his actual last matches. And I think somebody told me, I don't know, maybe you guys were there, I don't know, but somebody told me that he came out to Eye of the Tiger. Now that to me alone would be worth the price of admission. Almost like they knew it was going to be his last match. And they were just like, screw it, we're going to use Eye of the Tiger. And they let him use it, which he hadn't been allowed to use since like 1985, It's
crazy.
How do you feel about AEW at the minute? Like it seems to be stuck in a pit of its own sort of, it's in its own way. It's like, it's not breaking past that 1.2 mil in America. It just seems to be stuck. Well, like 1 million and under. Like, where is it going wrong?
Their numbers have improved since NXT was moved off Wednesdays.
Yeah,
their numbers have gone up from what they are from a year ago. I mean, I don't think there's anything going wrong. I think, look, it's still Dynamite is still the most, for my money, it's the most entertaining weekly wrestling show currently happening. It's not perfect. I have issues with their product. There's things I love. There's things I'm not crazy about, but they may have reached the limit of how far they can grow. I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe I'll be proven very wrong about that, but it's a question of how many people can you get to watch wrestling in 2022. And there's the issues of people not having cable as much anymore, especially in the United States, and disconnecting, and so they're watching it in other ways. I mean, I don't know this for a fact, but I think some people were mentioning how their YouTube shows, which are like afterthoughts, which are like with squash matches and C-level talent, because of the nature of it being on YouTube, those shows actually have more people watching them than Dynamite and Rampage, which goes to show you how everything's changing so much. It's not just a wrestling problem, it's a TV problem in general, the kind of numbers that shows do now. WWE and AEW, they're fighting for scraps. You know, they're excited because a show got like a 1.8 or something. Like, I can remember the days where if you just ran like a test pattern for 3 hours, you'd get a 1.8. You know what I mean? Like Raw was doing 6s and 7s, and not only and even like the hottest network shows, if they do like a 3 or a 4, it's considered like one of the hottest shows on television, whereas that used to be like kind of especially if you were like a big network show. So who knows how it'll all shake out. Even the Super Bowl here in America is not getting anywhere near the numbers it used to get. The Academy Awards, which, you know, billions of viewers worldwide, the ratings have been plummeting on things like that. It's a weird time. It's very hard to predict.
Talking about the Academy Awards, the Will Smith slap, was it a work?
No, it was not a work. I think you have a lot of people that watch way too much wrestling, If you use your brain for 2 seconds and you think, why in the world would they do something like this? Who is benefiting from this? Like, Will Smith is kind of ruined.
That's
and
right.
even if he's not ruined, the work he will have to do to recuperate himself is, why would he be like, oh yeah, let's do this on live TV? No, of course. These are people who they think of everything in wrestling terms, everything. Just because Andy Kaufman and Jerry Lawler was a work, it doesn't mean everything is a work. I mean, come on, use your head.
Oh man, I listened just for the pure fucking entertainment value of it. I listened to Eric Bischoff and Jeff Jarrett talk for 25 minutes or so on how it was a work, and how, you know, Chris Rock stood there and leaned into it and stuff, and they were like breaking it down and like pausing the shot, and I was like, jeez, fucking Christ.
And one guy said to me, well, didn't you hear that really fake sound effect when he hit his face? It was this really loud. Why would you hear that loud thing? And I said, well, you do realize he has a microphone right here. And there was no response to that. None. But that's the thing, like just the slightest bit of mental effort and it falls apart, you know, it was just something that never should have happened. And clearly if it had been a work, it never would have got that far, because somebody would have been like, please do not do this. Don't do this. You know, there's nothing to be gained from doing this.
Smith never slapped his thigh, so I'm
don't
with that. Yeah.
Don't forget, half the people you're talking about debating this think that the earth is flat. So I mean, I don't know how much we could put into their faith we could put in their levels of analysis. So
so I swear, I think AJ Styles said something about that, didn't he, as well?
He is supposed to be a flat earther, AJ Styles. Yes.
Yeah, I did hear that, man. I did hear that. I mean, it's all right. So let's talk about wrestlers then. Let's talk about let's talk about individuals. So you've obviously been around the business, been in the business, spoken to hundreds, if not thousands of people in the wrestling sphere. You know, so you're working with ECW Press at the moment.
Yes.
And I'm taking it you've met a few people that were in ECW, then obviously doing the research for the book. I mean, who's the strangest person that you've met in the wrestling business?
Well, just to clarify, ECW Press actually has nothing to do with ECW. It's a very bizarre, strange coincidence.
Right.
And part of it is because they also happen to publish a lot of wrestling books. People assume that, but there's no connection. It stands for something entirely different. I do not know what it stands for, but something different.
Yeah.
They publish lots of other types of books, not just wrestling. And it really is just a pure coincidence. But I wanted to, when I was thinking of a new book and who I wanted it to be about, being the original Sheik, I came to them because they have that reputation for being the most legit, mainstream, like serious book publishers who handle wrestling stuff.
Right.
and they had just done the Andre the Giant biography. There was Bill Apter did his book with them. John Arezzi had his book come out. And I thought, let me give it a shot. It's worth it. And I think part of the reason why ECW Press agreed to it is that ECW Press is a Canadian company, and the Sheik had been a huge name in Montreal and Toronto, among other places. And so I think they felt there was a big crossover appeal there with their Canadian readers. So I have that probably to thank for them agreeing to let me write a book about somebody who's been dead for 20 years and who, peaked before I was even born, in the early 70s. So I'm very grateful that they gave it a chance, because I just gave it a shot. I was like, what the hell? Let's see what they say. If they say no, I'll just think of something else. And they were all about it. So.
I mean, the original Sheik was wrestling in the fucking late 50s, right? He was like
late 40s even he started.
Wow. Incredible.
Yeah.
Absolutely incredible.
And up until the 90s, right? He did some FMW stuff as well.
Yeah, he wrestled he basically he stopped. He went into semi-retirement in the early 80s, where he wasn't working a full schedule anymore. He was only doing occasional dates here and there all through the rest of the 90s. The rest of the 80s. But when he got to the 90s, all of a sudden, 91, 92, 93, 94, he's working back to almost a full-time schedule in his 60s in Japan, wrestling for Tsushi Onita and FMW, who, by the way, are paying him $10,000 an appearance. Now, I would have done the same thing. So would anybody.
Yeah, man.
Especially and they know he could hardly move, and he was just going down to the ring and kind of throwing fire and chasing people around for 4 minutes. And then you come back through the curtain and they hand you 10 grand. Sure, sign me up. I mean, who's not going to do that? He made probably millions doing that.
I mean, he definitely influenced quite a few wrestlers as well in his style. I mean, he actually did play the madman, right? It was literally, and you've got guys like his son was in WWF, Tiger Jeet Singh. You remember Tiger Jeet Singh? He used to do the similar thing with the fucking sword, right? He used to go out in the crowd and chat. It was a very not samey, but it was a very similar kind of gimmick,
Right. He was Tiger Jeet Singh, who actually is from India. He was using the whole he was like the mad Indian.
Yeah.
And the Sheik was the mad Arab. So they were like a perfect match for each other. And they feuded all over the world.
Yeah.
Now Singh was gigantic, though, the huge man. The Sheik really was not. He was a very average sized person, maybe about 5'8", 5'9", about 210, 215 pounds, even though both height and weight were exaggerated, of course, because he's a wrestler. But so he had to make up for that lack of size to be just as fearsome as a lot of those other guys were. But yeah, Tiger Jeet Singh was a big early progenitor of that hardcore crazy style, and also coincidentally was big in Japan too, just like the Sheik.
Yeah. Remember Tiger Jeet Singh? I've got on VHS. I'm a huge VHS collector, and I've got the deathmatch tournament. The infamous one, and Tiger Jeet Singh's in that one, and he was huge over there. Absolutely, and he was going absolutely crazy in the crowd. Incredible stuff.
Just how big was the Sheik in Detroit? We're not, we're not old enough to know as much about the sort of the territories and that, but all I ever read about was how big he was in Detroit, and he was really big name for decades.
Yeah. So of course in those days you had the especially in North America, you had the wrestling territories, and there were about 30 to 35 of them at any given time. WWF was only one of them, of that many. And so whereas in those days, WWF would have been the Northeastern United States, which would be like New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and a lot of New England states going down to Washington, D.C. The Sheik had control of a territory that basically in the United States would be considered like part of the Midwest. So it was Michigan, Ohio, parts of Indiana, and even like going into southern Ontario, province of Ontario in Canada, which borders on Michigan.
Yeah.
And so that realm, you know, he started out as a wrestler there because he's from that area. He's from Lansing, Michigan. And he started out just as a mid-carder, you know, there and other places. He was an attraction all over because it was an exotic kind of unique gimmick. But then when the promoters in that region, who were Jim Barnett and Johnny Doyle, when they decided to go to Australia, those guys, they owned pieces of a lot of American promotions. And they decided they were going to take up business in Australia where there really wasn't a lot of wrestling at the time. And they wound up establishing what became like the biggest promotion in the history of Australia. And in some ways, one of the most successful in the world. And ironically, it was called World Championship Wrestling. And it's funny because Jim Barnett, the guy who ran it, World Championship Wrestling, he eventually, when he moved back, he took over Georgia Championship Wrestling and he renamed that World Championship Wrestling. And that's kind of where WCW got their name. So it's a weird connection. But when he was trying to leave America, he sold his territory to the Sheik. And so the Sheik now is in control of this official. He joined the National Wrestling Alliance, which was like this confederation of all the territories. And he had official sanctioned control of that region. So, of course, you know, he made himself the biggest star in that territory. So when that happens, like 64, all of a sudden he becomes like this consistent main event guy, dominating their top title, which was the United States Heavyweight Championship, and also touring the rest of the territories as a major star. And his heyday is probably like from that early to mid 60s up until the early to mid 70s, especially. He's like one of the hottest things in the business. Yes, which is hard to do, especially as a heel, you know, to be. If you look at like Meltzer even did like the year by year breakdowns of who is the number one box office draw in wrestling each year, you will see there's like 3 or 4 years in that range where it's the Sheik. Like that's a big deal for a heel to do that. And even the other years around there where he's not number one, he's probably like 2 or 3, you know? So, I mean, he was a huge star, huge.
Would you say that was his peak then? What do you reckon, like mid 60s to what, mid 70s, early 80s?
I would say his peak as a wrestler, as a star, is probably like 64 to 74. And particularly even the Detroit territory, it's like late 60s, early 70s. You could even make an argument that they may have been the hottest territory in the country in those years at certain points. And, you know, it's a short time though, like that the company is so hot because like they burned really bright, they got really hot, and then it just kind of collapsed and the Sheik's career collapsed. And you can see like from 74 onward, it's like this downward trajectory. His company went out of business in 1980. And which is way before Vince McMahon and the WWF expansion. And he's just kind of limping along after that, trying to keep going. And, you know, the NWA blacklisted him and Vince didn't have any, you know, spot for him. And it just, it's a story that starts out really strong and amazing. And it's very impressive, but then it kind of gets very sad and tragic in the later years.
Until he starts earning 10 grand for appearances in Japan.
No, you're right. Yeah, and he jumped on that because he had been going for years of, you know, he went bankrupt. He lost his house.
Wow.
He almost lost, you know, he bought another house and almost lost that. He was in a lot of trouble. Nobody wanted to work with him anymore. He had really fallen out of fashion. He was considered like a dinosaur. And so that Japan deal was exactly what he needed. But, you know, in a lot of ways, because like we were joking and saying, how could you turn this money down? From a health point of view, It was a very bad idea because it almost killed him a couple of times. I mean, he was a grandfather. He was approaching 70. There was no way he should have been doing things like that, you know? So it was like, it was desperation. It was money that he needed so badly. And he was banking on his name power, which in Japan had still held up a lot better than it did in the United States because they hadn't seen him in a long time. And so he was able to exploit that towards the end of his career. But I think it hastened even the end of his life, honestly, because he stopped doing it in 95 and he only lived, he lived for 8 more years, but really the last few of them were very bad. Like really nobody saw him for the last 3 or 4 years of his life. He was just home in the house.
Didn't he break his legs like pretty close to the end of his career as well, like pretty badly?
Yeah, that was when Sabu was in WCW. So
Yeah.
the Sheik had just retired. And so he went back home to Lansing. And Sabu got this deal with WCW. And he decided to take advantage of it and go, hey, we're doing Halloween Havoc in Detroit. Can I have my uncle be my manager, you know? And he was kind of hoping that if it worked out, maybe it would be a long-term thing. It would be like a role for his uncle to have.
Yeah.
And even though he couldn't really get around and do much, that's something he could do. He could kind of, you know, walk to the ring and shake his sword around a little bit, maybe
Shout
like
some
throw a fireball.
Yeah.
And it was a disaster. So if you Halloween Havoc, it's Sabu versus JL, who was Jerry Lynn.
That's right.
And Sabu does a moonsault off the ropes to the outside. He lands on JL. He also lands on his uncle by accident, and he falls down and breaks his leg, which I think also it's not that terrible of a bump if you see it on TV. I think part of it was Sheik was so frail at that time, and he had a disorder like I don't think he knew it yet, but he had like a cancer in his bones, and it was weakening his skeletal structure. So he broke his leg, and what the craziest thing is, if you watch this thing, he gets up and he's at ringside for the rest of the match on a broken leg, and he's still walking around, shaking the sword, doing all his crazy stuff. And he, at the end of the match, he throws a fireball at Jerry Lynn, who has the distinction of being the last person to ever take a fireball from the Sheik. But the problem was he had never okayed that with anybody. And WCW didn't know he was going to do it. He just went into business for himself. And so the combination of this guy just broke his leg in the match, and he threw fire at one of our contracted talent. They just said to Sabu, you know, we don't want to do this anymore. And that was the one and only appearance that Sheik made for WCW. And it was actually, if I remember right, it was the last appearance that he ever made for any major promotion. The only thing he did after that was his retirement ceremony in '98 with FMW. That was it.
I think that WCW Halloween Havoc, we're going to have to review that one next.
Oh,
because
boy. Yeah, that's
do it.
Yeah,
we'll have to see.
That's how
it's
we
not
started
Halloween Havoc 95.
Yeah,
Halloween Havoc 95 in the Joe Louis Arena in Detroit.
That's for sure got to be the next one, George.
Did Sabu have a lot of input with the book?
No, he did not. I would have liked him to, and the problem is that, you know, a lot of times with wrestling books and things, there's an expectation of money, you know, and this isn't. You know, Sabu did his own book called Scars, Silence, and Superglue, which I read, and it's good, and it was very helpful. And, you know, that was a way for him to be paid for telling his story. But ECW Press is not going to pay people to be interviewed for a book unless it's their book.
Sure.
So the minute you start doing that, then everybody wants to get paid. Yeah. And not only that, but, you know, in the world outside of wrestling books, you know, with biographies and nonfiction books, it's not really the way to do business. In fact, it's looked on as it kind of hurts the credibility of your book if you're paying everybody.
People. Yeah,
right. You're paying people to talk to you. then it sort of like twists the book. And I didn't, ECW Press is not going to do it. I don't have the money to pay anybody to be interviewed. I mean, I'm barely being paid to write the book. It's not, I think people think I'm becoming like a multimillionaire. I'm a school teacher, and I could probably make in about 6 weeks teaching English in high school what I would make writing this book. So it's not like I'm cashing in on some, I wrote this to tell the story and to preserve the legacy of the Sheik. So, the bottom line was that we couldn't make a deal because money was a deal breaker. And it wasn't anything, there was no animosity. It wasn't, it was very matter of fact. I reached out to him, he responded to me, and it sort of went nowhere. I did benefit from the fact that I was really, really close friends with Melissa Coates, who was his the Super Genie. She was his girlfriend and his valet. And we had gone back to the WWE developmental days. She was in WWE developmental when I was working there. And she would help me, she would kind of go back and forth and try to persuade him or get maybe some answers out of him for me. And she made sure that I got a copy of his book, which I paid for. But she made sure it got into my hands. Unfortunately, she passed away before my book was done.
Yeah.
But I mean, we had a few dealings back and forth, and I wish, in some ways, I wish I could have had a lot of family involvement, because you get things like, you get unique stories and insights, you get photography that you're never going to get anywhere else. But there's also a flip side of that, where you could potentially lose control of your work and your project.
Yeah.
And you have to tell the story a certain way. And I really liked being independent. And I kept saying to people, even Sheik's own son, who I was dealing with at the time, I would say, look, if you want this story told a certain way, write your book. You're the son of the Sheik. This is my book. This is my project. I conceptualized it. I pitched it. I have an idea of the kind of story I want to tell. I would like to get your, experiences, but it's not your book, with all due respect. And if you want to be paid, and if you want to get your version of the story out and all this, write your own book. So that was sort of like the stalemate that occurred.
And,
So,
sorry, yeah, you've got the foreword written by RVD as well.
I did. And, would have, this is no, RVD is amazing. I love him. And he wrote the thing himself 100%, and I'm sure a lot of people are like, well, shouldn't that have been Sabu that wrote the foreword to the book and all that? I would have loved for Sabu to write the foreword to the book. But again, like I said, Rob understood the way that the process worked, that, it's something he's contributing to my book. And it's his experiences and insights that he's sharing. And by the way, for people listening that may not be aware, like, why RVD? Well, RVD and Sabu were both trained by the Sheik.
yeah.
And they're by far his most famous and successful proteges. RVD even more so, honestly, than Sabu. I mean, Sabu is an extremely influential wrestler and had a huge impact on other people. But RVD had much more success in his career, and he was the world's champion, WWE main eventer, and Impact and everywhere else. And of course, CCW and Japan. So that's why I approached him, and he did such a great job. And, I want to stress, he wrote it himself, because a lot of times when people write a foreword for a book, if they're famous, they didn't really write it. I mean, I don't think I'm revealing anything shocking most of the time. In fact, most of the time they didn't really write it. And sometimes they didn't even approve of it. They just said, yeah, you could put my name on it. Like, so sometimes they don't even look at it. And in my case, he wrote it top to bottom. All I did was fix typos, he wrote that forward, and I'm so glad that he did. And he did. It was so nice of him to agree to do it, and then to agree to come on my podcast to talk about the Sheik and to talk about the book. In fact, I saw recently that he mentioned it on Busted Open Radio, which I don't know if you have that over there, because we have Sirius XM satellite radio.
We don't have the Sirius like thing, but we have. I mean, we can get Busted Open. We can get the guys on.
Yeah.
Whether they've got on it.
Because Busted Open Radio is probably over here the biggest like wrestling radio show that there is, and he was on of course for 420. They had Rob Van Dam on,
of course, yeah.
And he plugged the book and he mentioned me by name, and I thanked him. I was just it was very cool of him to do.
That's great, man. That's good shit. I mean,
sound like Vince McMahon when you say that.
Yeah, that's good shit.
That's good shit, pal.
That's good shit, pal.
Did you ever get a good shit, pal, from Vince?
Yeah.
No, but he did tell me to take my head out of Dave Meltzer's ass once.
Oh shit.
So I have that.
And just for the sake of the interview, what was your head doing up Dave Meltzer's ass, or was it in fact even up there?
Well, I've told this story, but Vince had this idea that a lot of us, and it wasn't totally wrong, that a lot of the writers and the wrestling fans in the creative end of the company, a lot of us were reading The Observer, and right. I think he was concerned about the influence Meltzer was having on us, because Meltzer's approach to wrestling, his philosophy of good wrestling, is very different from Vince McMahon's. And I know this because I've spoken to both of them about their philosophies about wrestling, and it's very different. And they've both mentioned the other one by name when talking about how it's different. So the weird thing was, it was, again, I have told this before, so if I sound repetitive to people that have listened to other interviews I've done, I apologize, but it's a great story where I used to have to pitch magazine ideas to Vince directly. And the reason was because I was working for Shane. So Shane would bring me to his dad and be like, tell my dad those ideas you told me about and see what he says, and I would be sitting in a conference room, a boardroom, and it would be like a round table, and Vince is there, and it's like, okay, now it's time for the publications people. Brian, go. And I'd be like, okay, Vince, here's what we're looking at for the September issue of SmackDown magazine. And I'm going, why in the world this would be like if I worked for Disney and I'm in the office of like the CEO of Disney, and I'm going, here's this new goofy t-shirt we're going to be making. Tell us what you think. Like that, you would think he'd be so far above this, but he wasn't. So I'm running down these ideas. First, he starts to pretend to fall asleep. That's the first thing he did. I'm like, we're going to do an interview with Booker T. And he's going, and then my next idea. So I told him we wanted to do, this sounds like the most innocent thing ever. We'd like to do an article on the history of steel cage matches or something, or the greatest steel cage matches of all time. And that's when he said to me, you guys need to take your head out of Meltzer's ass. And I think it took me a minute. Like, I don't understand. What's the connection? And I think in his mind, he sees anything that's historical, because Meltzer, he does those great history pieces in The Observer all the time. Anything that's historical and divorced from storyline, but just history for its own sake, and that is not being done as a way to make money, like the Hall of Fame. To him, that's Meltzer. Like, he immediately thinks, oh, that's Meltzer's kind of shit, So the minute I brought up something historical in that way that was not tied to an angle on TV, he was just totally annoyed by it. And that's why he said that. I think that's my theory. I don't know at the end of the day what he was thinking, but that's definitely what he said to me. Take my head out of Dave Meltzer's ass. Yep. That's me.
So here's a quick question for you then on that vein.
Sure.
In your opinion, the dirt sheets, or the rag sheets, brother, as Hulk Hogan said once, do you feel that they have had a negative effect, or the way they are now, and the pure amount of them that they are, like these online wrestling dirt sheets, rag sheets behind the scenes. This is happening, that's happening. Do you think that that's overall had a negative effect on how wrestling is perceived, first of all, and how nothing's really a surprise anymore? And overall, do you think that is negative on the wrestling business
It's
as entertainment?
complicated.
Yeah.
It's complicated because when Dave started doing his thing as the Observer at the beginning of the 80s, it was the first of its kind. It wasn't a magazine, it wasn't a fanzine, or it was something that the wrestling business needed, which was an industry newsletter. It was like the wrestling version of, here in America, we have Variety newspaper or Hollywood Reporter, which go back to the early days of Hollywood. And it would be like, it would only be read by people in the business who wanted to learn about what was going on in their industry. And wrestling never had that. And that's what the Observer was. And a lot of people hated it, even in the 80s, because they were going, this guy's exposing things. You know, anyone can subscribe to this thing and learn all this stuff.
Right.
They hated it. There were some people that got it. Like there were a lot of people you would hear about in the wrestling business that had TV backgrounds. Like Lance Russell comes to mind. He was the announcer in Memphis. He loved the Observer because he was a guy that came from TV. He came from news. He understood the need for having, oh, I want to learn what's happening in my business. You know, he understood that. The problem you have is then when you get to the age of the internet, the Observer, two things. First of all, the Observer probably, the biggest problem is that it's probably read by way more people than it should be read by, where it was originally intended as something for industry people and people who are, even if they're fans, they're very interested in the business side of the business, and they follow it for that way. The average casual fan who just watches the shows and likes to, you know, just go to the matches, those people, they never needed to read the Observer, quite honestly. But because of the internet changing the game and being a way you could find things out and everything, so many people got exposed that I don't think ever really understood what it was supposed to be. So sometimes it breaks my brain when I go on Twitter and you get people like running him down and calling him a shill and saying, why are you giving how much did they pay you to mention Brian Solomon's Sheik book? Is this an endorsement? And I'm going, this man is a journalist, you know, he's covering this industry. Yes, he has his biases. Yes, every journalist does. Everyone who covers any industry has a bias. He has in his mind what's a quote unquote good match, what's a good product, what's good for business. That's reflected in what he writes. The problem is not Dave Meltzer. The problem is there should be 10, 12 other wrestling observers out there written by other people with different biases and different points of view. And you get a mix. And that's what's good for the business. What you have now, though, is because of the internet, you have Meltzer, who has been doing this since forever. You have a couple of other people like, you know, Wade Keller has been doing it a very long time with the torch. Dave Shearer has been doing this a very long time. But then you also have all these people who they're running websites. They're fans. Everyone calls what they do dirt sheets, even though they're not dirt sheets. It's just some guy with a website who reads the Observer and then he writes about what he reads in the Observer.
Yeah.
And that makes the problem even worse because you have these professional people, journalists, who are now getting lumped in with all these other people who are not in their league at all. And so it's just a big giant mess. And like I said, you get all these people on Twitter and people who are fans that they just don't, with all due respect, they just don't understand. They don't understand what the purpose of these things was supposed to be, you know. And I think Dave Meltzer is a treasure. He's not perfect. I'll defend him all the time. I think what he does is very valuable and important. And when he's gone and not doing this anymore, there is not going to be anybody who can fill the shoes of what he's doing. Never. And I'm not just, you know, because half the time people that run him down, They don't even read the Observer. They look at his tweets, or they might read what he posts on his website, and that's it. And they don't even read it, and they don't understand what he does every week. The guy has probably written more words than any human being who has ever lived, and I'm not even exaggerating. You know, if you read it every week, you'll understand the value of what he does. And I mean, really read it. You'll get the value of what he does. Like, half the time people will say the dumbest things, like with Cody jumping to WWE. You'll get these just dummies and they'll come on social media and they'll go, whoa, Meltzer clearly has no idea what's going on, because, you know, this happened out of nowhere. There was no sign of this. And all of a sudden Cody leaves AEW and Meltzer had no idea. And I'm going, if you read the Observer, you would have known that Cody was probably going to leave AEW about 6 months ago if you actually read it, because he did know what was going on. He was reporting on what was happening. Was it always perfect? No. But he had his sources, and if you read it, you would actually have known ahead of time. The fact that you had no clue this was going to happen is proof that you're not really following what's going on. So he's valuable, is what I'm saying. He's not perfect. We need more of him, not less. More people like him.
I don't disagree with his value. Like, he's, as a historian, Dave is, you know, he's the guy. You know, Brian is okay. You know, he's got a couple of books and stuff. Like, Brian's got some good books too. Like, I actually have one. I have The Death of WCW on the shelf. You know, it's one of my favorites. So I can't lie about that. I think Dave's Twitter game is awful. Like, he needs to, you know, sometimes
he needs to be on it less is the problem. I think. But no, I agree with you there. And I think, like, what you're saying is that what I was saying before ties into that, because it's like, I think there's a lot of fans who only know him from Twitter.
Yes.
And that's like, it's like the people that only know Jim Cornette from his podcast, you know. Yeah. Those people equally have no idea what they're talking about, because he's not just this angry guy on a podcast making fun of Kenny Omega. Like, if you knew who he was. Same thing with Meltzer. You're right. There's times where many of us don't do ourselves any favors by being on Twitter too much. And I have to tell you, I have a Herculean level of self-control on a daily basis with the things that I could say and the responses I could make. Not everybody has the same kind of self-control that I have. Like, I had a thing happen recently. You know, I very carefully control myself. I had a thing happen recently where I made a very innocuous comment about somebody that got completely blown out of proportion by a wrestling journalist on Twitter who tried to shame me. And in a very succinct way, I just said, go fuck yourself. That was my response. I don't normally do that on Twitter.
Sorry, who was the journalist?
I don't really want to say, but
all right.
But people can probably find out if they're on Twitter. But he blocked me, and
serial blocker. Okay.
Yeah, no, it was just, I don't really do that, but there are people who they get really wrapped up in things and they lose it sometimes, and I think they could sometimes be better served by pulling back a little bit and not. There's times where you don't have to engage. If I look and I see this guy has 4 followers, who gives a shit what he's saying and what he has to, you know, I'm not going to get in. Why in the world would I play that game? If his avatar is like a character from anime, I'm not going to get involved. I'm not going to go down that road at all. It's not happening. You know, that's just danger, Will Robinson, danger. So you have to know how to chart those waters. Absolutely. No question.
Like you say, especially in this day and age where it seems that Twitter is almost everything to some people. You know, it is a huge platform. I mean,
woke and broke at the same time, isn't it?
But I mean,
we live in this weird time. It's crazy to think about. You know, we take it for granted where just everyday people can just interact with huge, important people just on a random, casual basis. People who grew up in this world, I guess you don't really understand how weird this is. It's really weird. Like I couldn't, when I was a little kid, I couldn't be like, Walter Cronkite, you're an asshole. You have no idea what the hell you're talking about. You know, Walter Cronkite, who was like the most respected journalist in America for decades, you know, like he would have no idea I ever existed, and nor millions of other people. But now we live in this weird time where people can just be like, you're a jerk. And then it's up to this celebrity to decide, like, do I respond to this or not? And the smarter ones understand 99.9% of the time. Just pretend that it didn't happen and you'll be fine, you know?
So just for reference, Walter Cronkite, let's say he's the British equivalent of, the British equivalent of Walter Cronkite is probably Sir Trevor McDonald. Like, we're not going to get on Twitter and start abusing Sir Trevor about anything like that, you know, like, you know, his wrestling opinions don't matter to us, do they?
Right. I was trying. I'm sorry. I was trying to think of a good British equivalent, and I just couldn't. I was trying to think of some. I'm sure there's many.
Piers Morgan, you could have said,
but he deserves it though. Please do not put Piers Morgan in the same category as Walter Cronkite.
I tell you, the only way I know Walter Cronkite is from an Exhibit song.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so Walter Cronkite was the ultimate, like, respected voice of American television news from probably the 60s through the 80s. Like, he was at a time when there were 3 channels on TV. There was no internet. Like, he was, when he said it on the news, you believed it and you trusted it. In fact, to the point where he came on TV. He went to Vietnam to cover the war in Vietnam. He came back to America on a news broadcast with tens of millions of people watching back then. He said, in this reporter's opinion, I do not believe the United States can win this war. And a lot of people say that's when America's attitude towards the war shifted, where they were just like, why are we fighting this war? A lot of it had to do with because they trusted him that much. You know, we don't have people like that anymore. But what I'm trying to say, though, is like, there was no way in those days, if I'm sitting at home in my living room in my underwear drinking a beer and I'm going, Walter Cronkite, you're full of shit, we're gonna win this war, you don't know what you're talking about, you commie left-wing liberal idiot, right? That would end in my living room, right?
Sure.
The end. We don't, you know, now that guy goes on his computer and potentially limitless amounts of people can hear him say that and react to that. So it's such a different media landscape now, where, to tie it back to wrestling and Meltzer, you can have people now, unfortunately, who are valuable people, important, who can harm the way they're viewed and harm their legacies and reputation sometimes by the way in which they engage with these things in ways that maybe they just shouldn't, you know, and it affects the way people look at them, because they get to see them, people get to see them in a much more unguarded way. Like there's far less image control nowadays than there was back then. I'm sure if Walter Cronkite was on Twitter, if Twitter existed back then, I don't know if we'd look at him the same way now, because he'd probably be like, fuck you. I think Vietnam, we're going to lose this war, you stupid idiot. So why don't you shut up and stop tweeting at me from your living room, you idiot. I was there. I was in Vietnam. You know, we would have had all that nonsense. Whereas back then it was much more cut and dried.
Do you think, on probably the last point on this Twitter stuff, but like, do you think sometimes the ambiguity of Meltzer's tweets, sometimes he does it to get the engagement?
You know what I think happens a lot with him? I don't think it's him being like the smart ass that he's trying to troll people. I think it's because he is still trying to do the job that he's always done as like this like arbiter and this wrestling pundit that would reveal information to the fans in a time when that type of stuff is looked at very differently. Like, for example, and this happens with Brian Alvarez too, who's like his, you know, his right-hand man. Meltzer will tweet something like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of something off the top of my head. He'll just tweet something out of the blue, like Vince McMahon is like out of the blue, like people in AEW are saying that Bret Hart is under a contract and he can't do anything with them because of this.
Yeah.
He's reporting that as a journalist in the same way he might put it in the Observer, or on his website in years past. And now it's a breaking item. He throws it on Twitter, but because Twitter is Twitter, people see that and they go like, what are you trying to say, Dave Meltzer? What does that mean? Are you anti Bret Hart? Are you trying to trash WWE? Why would you say that now? And they read too much into it. They think that he's tweeting in the same way that other people will tweet because they're trying to create a furor, when all he's doing is saying, I just got off the phone with this guy that just told me that Bret Hart is under contract. So I'm going to immediately tweet it out because I'm Dave Meltzer. And people just take it the wrong way. I think they think there's an agenda when there really isn't an agenda. It's just business as usual for him.
Yeah, because whatever he tweets out, people are just assuming that it's him just talking about stuff.
Right. Sometimes it will come out, it will appear to just be this random non sequitur.
Yeah.
And people think, oh, it's Meltzer on a mountaintop giving his opinion on something out of the blue, where it's really just, he's just reporting on shit as it comes to him, He's just reporting things. And then again, I think people, if you read the Observer, then you understand it more, because you will see that he does it to everyone. Like if he's ripping things, WWE things, he's ripping AEW things, he's not, he's praising this, he's praising that, but the nuance doesn't come out unless you're willing to sit down and read all that tiny little print in the Observer that comes out every week. If you're just looking at tweets, it seems like totally out of context. Like, why is he saying that? What's the hidden meaning there? And there isn't a hidden meaning.
Is he closer to AEW than WWE?
Well, I think that the issue, there's a couple of things. He was directly connected to the creation of AEW, not directly, but he was involved in that whole thing that happened with Cody and the Young Bucks, and how he said that nobody could ever do a show, the story where he said like no one could ever just out of the blue run a wrestling show promotion and draw people, and Cody was like, really, challenge accepted, and he went and did it. And so I think there'll always be an affinity there, that, he understands that he played this weird indirect role in the creation of the company. But then you get people that are saying like they're paying him and he's there as a, he's trying to tear WWE down to help them. And I don't believe any of that for a second. I really don't. I think sometimes what does happen is, he has the things that he likes and the things that he doesn't like. And AEW right now is doing more of the things that he likes. And that's where personal bias comes in. Like I said, anyone's going to have a personal bias. Dave Meltzer has his idea of what a great wrestling match is. That's very different from what Vince McMahon's idea of what a great wrestling match is. Vince McMahon, that's what I meant when I said we need more people doing this that have different opinions and views. Vince McMahon told me in an interview, and he mentioned Meltzer directly. He said, he said to me, I don't like these star ratings for matches and the way that people like Dave Meltzer, they will take a match out of context, out of the storyline, out of the show, and just look at it as an artifact and rate the match on a scale of like 1 to 5 or whatever it is. He says, I don't believe in doing that. Like the way I judge it, and this is Vince talking, the way I judge it, a match is only as valuable to me as it serves the purpose of the storyline and it moves the storyline along. So he brought up the example, like he would say, like when people will look at an opening match with these cruiserweights and they're doing incredible things, and they'll say, this was better than any other match on the show. Like, I don't see it that way, because to me, the best match on the show is the match that the people paid the money to see, the match that they actually wanted to see. And so this could be a match they didn't even know was going to be on the show. So it's less valuable to me. So he brought up WrestleMania 3 as the classic example, because he said, everybody always talks about Ricky Steamboat versus Randy Savage. They stole the show, and that was the greatest match on the show, and it totally overshadowed the main event and Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant. And he would say, from my point of view, I don't understand how anyone can say that, because that Randy and Rick did a great job. They're incredible performers. They were good in their role as being a supporting match on the show. But that match is Andre the Giant. That show is Andre the Giant versus Hulk Hogan. That is the reason that show happened. That's the reason anybody watched it. That was what drew the numbers. And when you watch it, yeah, they're not as fast and they're not doing all the technical moves. But from a storyline point of view, everything that went into it, with the betrayal and the, with Andre turning heel, and then now you've got the two hugest stars in the entire industry face to face. He goes, that's the best match on the show, not because of what they did in the bell to bell, but because of what it was. So like, that's the Vince McMahon approach of rating a product. Meltzer's view is totally different. So of course, Meltzer probably prefers to watch AEW than WWE, but he's still covering the industry, and he's still trying to uncover the truth about things and facts about things. And so I don't believe for a second that he's rooting for one side to fail and one side to succeed. I do not believe that at all.
It's funny because for all of the talk of sports entertainment, Vince's way sounds a lot like the sporting pay-per-view model of, for instance, last night's Tyson Fury fight. Nobody was paying to watch the undercard. They were paying to watch Tyson Fury and Dillian White go at it. That was it. Like, it was it wasn't even a great fight. It was just a great uppercut. Like, that was it. Like,
that's very true.
Remember that ahead of anything else that happened on that show.
And I watch a lot of boxing because my family was in boxing for years. Not me. I can't. The only thing I ever fought was hunger. But I had people in my family who were boxers and trainers and things. And it's very true about boxing. A lot of times, like I went to see, I saw Deontay Wilder at the Barclays Center. It was what in wrestling we would call a squash match. I forget, Dominic Briazale. He fought him. It was where he knocked him out in 2 minutes of the first round. If you ever saw this, I mean, he killed him.
Yeah, I'll see it.
And it was one of those things where I got there at the beginning of for the first undercard match, and I got to see about 6 or 7 good fights leading up to it. Half the audience didn't even get there until the main event went on, and they were pissed, because of what happened. I thought it was amazing. It was great theater. This guy got knocked out in 2 minutes. Oh my God, that's crazy. My son's there with me, and it's this one punch, just like boom, and my son is losing his mind. But if you just came there to see that, well, you got screwed. But you see, that's the attitude of boxing. And you're right, that is the Vince McMahon attitude of wrestling. That, yeah, some of those undercard matches were great. They were amazing. The technique, and they went 12 rounds and blah, 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 blah. Nobody came there to see that. When they were in their seats, they happened to be there and they happened to get a good show. But that's not what you build your promotion around. That's his view. Like, what's important to me is what draws. It's where the drama comes from, rather than just taking this match that's technically brilliant, but has nothing to do with anything. I'm not going to say it's bad, and even he wouldn't say that. It's great, but it's not the most important thing on that show. And that's where his view differs from a lot of like the kind of work rate people and the hardcore, like this match is 12.5 stars, like those kind of people. His view is very different. And to be honest with you, I kind of lean more towards Vince's way of looking at things, especially the older I get, more perspective I get on the business. It's like I always say, I always have to separate what I personally enjoy from what's the best for business. Like a lot of times there's things that I go, this is horrible. I don't understand. But if everyone wants to see this, keep doing it. You know what I mean? Like I have to separate myself from that. Like if this is what's working, do it. So because I look at it more from an inside the industry view than just as a pure fan.
Do you find that since you've been in the business and you know about it, do you think it's harder for you to kind of suspend your disbelief when you're watching wrestling and just kind of watch it as pure entertainment? Or do you find yourself, slipping into the
that was always my favorite thing about being a fan, was suspending the disbelief. Like, I never thought that the business was a shoot. Even as a child, I understood.
Yeah.
I understood it was entertainment and show business, but I liked to suspend disbelief in the moment. And I always remember when you'd go to shows back then, a lot of the audience was doing that. And I don't think they do that anymore. People
No.
would get lost in the moment. People where if you got them away from the arena 2 days later in a room, they would be like, yeah, I know, it's, whatever. But in that moment, they were in it, like believing it for that 3 hours, believing it. Can't do that anymore. I can't do that anymore most of the time. And the problem is not me. The problem is wrestling. The problem is the way it's presented. It's right in your face. This is not real. It's right there. And they, when kayfabe kind of went out the window, and I don't believe it ever 100% went out the window, because, if people really thought that Vince McMahon was holding down Daniel Bryan, well, then that gives me a lot of hope that kayfabe isn't truly dead. It's not truly dead, but they make it a lot harder to suspend disbelief now, because they used to care a lot more about trying to make something realistic, if even realistic within the confines of wrestling. Like, nobody who knows what a shoot fight really looks like is going to mistake a wrestling match for a shoot fight. Even a great scientific technical match, you're going to know these guys are working together. But within the confines of wrestling, there is a way to create drama if you believe in what you're doing. And the way the product is a lot of the time makes it very hard to do that. I think one of the biggest turning points in wrestling, I've never really talked about this, was back in the day, the wrestlers were always nuts. They were always crazy characters, always goofy and weird and strange, but you were willing to buy it because the overall package, like the promotion, was presented as serious. The announcers were usually very serious. The authority figures were not characters. It was just a guy in a suit who ran, so you got the impression you got was, this is a sports league. This is a sporting event. It happens to be full of complete lunatics who are in the ring, but we're doing our best to control it and govern it and contain it. Whereas now it's like a complete circus where it's, the authority figures are characters, they're faces and heels. The referees are characters. They're selling the moves the wrestlers make and doing goofy things like that, and ignoring the rules, such as they are. The announcers are even the baby face and now are just complete characters. And you have when you have a situation where wrestlers can just make a match on the fly, and they're not even creating the illusion that there's a governing body, and a wrestler can't just be like, let's have a match right now. Okay, get in the ring. Where's the referee? Like, they would never do stuff like that, because can you do that in boxing? Can a boxer just run in the ring and go, I want you in the ring right now? Of course not, And if you watch old wrestling, you would see scenarios like that where a wrestler would be like, I want this. I want to have this match. And they would have the guy come out and go like, you don't make the matches here, we do.
That's right.
And you have to go through the proper channels.
We got to sign a contract.
Right. We're gonna make this match.
Yeah.
And those kind of things, they made you believe that this was a sport, or at least a sports-like presentation. The announcers wouldn't insult your intelligence. Like, even when something crazy was happening in the ring, the announcers wouldn't go along with it. The announcers would let you know that they thought this was ridiculous too. They were trying to make sense out of it. Like Gordon Soley here in the US was great at doing that.
Yeah.
Of like, I am a normal man at ringside calling this lunacy, but I'm not selling you a line of BS because I have my own credibility that I'm trying to preserve. So like, that stuff has gone out the window in wrestling, where like, everything is just part of the show now. And so when you do that, you can't really believe in anything, you know, like, look, everything has a place. And like when Cornette will go off on some of these really ridiculous things, I think that's the difference. Those things always went on in wrestling, but there was always the sense that the promotion was not a part of it. Like the promotion was a real wrestling promotion that was trying to create order. They weren't contributing to the chaos. And that's kind of what we have now, you know, with referees. Like the Young Bucks have their pet referee that they have for every match, who lets them just do whatever they feel like doing. And it takes me out of their matches because there's no structure. There's no, it's like there's no rules anymore. It's like when you can throw a closed fist, right? That removes so many possibilities of like getting heat. You have a heel, like hitting the face when the referee isn't looking, you get heat. Or you get the baby face who's like, he's losing it. Like he doesn't want to throw that punch. He doesn't want to break the rules, but he's getting madder and madder. And he's like, oh, I'm going to do it. And the crowd is, yes, hit him, right? But when you have no rules and the guys are just punching each other in the face and the referee's just going, yes, very good, very good. Well, you lose so many opportunities to create tension and drama in a match, to create an illusion of a sport with rules. All these things get thrown out the window when it's this anything goes attitude that wrestling has now. So that's one of my problems I have with it.
This is an amazing little segue for us to just quickly mention our Marty Elias interview, where Marty just completely almost says what you're saying here, like, you know, how too much of the refereeing now is, you know, broken.
Yeah, because people forget. Look, I'm not trying to say that wrestling has real rules. We all know it doesn't. It's a show that, you know, the rules are part of the illusion, but you have to pretend that they exist.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just a mess. Like it also makes the referees look bad. That's one of my issues with AEW. I do feel that WWE gives the referees a little more backbone, where it's like you're supposed to be the authority in there. The wrestlers listen to you, but even they're not great about it. Like if you watch old wrestling, that referee is the fucking boss in there, and they know it. If you watch guys like Dick Kroll, Dick Worley, we had Red Shoes Dugan in California, Tommy Young in the NWA, right? He'd get, like, Flair would get in his face and he would get right back in his face and push him right back. Like these guys knew, at least in the storyline of the match, like this guy is the boss and we got to listen to him and to what he says. And now you get this thing where half the time, I don't know if you noticed this, and this shows you how robotic a lot of the wrestling is. This happens in WWE especially. The referee is screaming in their faces, pointing and yelling, and the wrestlers are not even acknowledging that he's there.
Yeah.
They're not turning and jaw jacking and get out of my way. Shut up. There's none of that. It's like the guy's not even there. And it exposes everything. Like the referee is a complete joke. The referee, I love FTR because they try to do these old school spots. And half the time, the referee doesn't even know what they're even trying to do.
That's right. They're not selling it.
Right. Yeah. You notice in their matches, they try to do these cute things where you distract the referee. I'm going to do this, or I'm going to try to tag you when I'm not really in the corner, and I'm going to double team you. But because the referee is so clueless, they're doing it for nothing. The referee just lets them do anything, and there's no spot because the referee's not giving anything back,
I mean, like you say, we had Marty Elias on, and we spoke to him for quite a long time, and we had some great conversations with him about this kind of stuff. How there is a way, and it's not just AEW specific. Like you say, in WWE, the referees are kind of seen as a third wheel, but at least there's a little bit more legitimacy, I think, from that side. With AEW, it's a bit kind of more Wild West with Aubrey and stuff like that that's going on. But it can be, legitimacy can be brought back using the referees as that central point of authority, saying right. And that's why it annoys me partly, sorry to go on, but about AEW.
Great topic.
the standings that they have, the rankings, because on one side of it, AEW is like the Wild West when it comes to match structure, and it doesn't really seem that sport like. And then they go right to the other end of the scale and have no, but these are the win-loss rankings, so a win and a loss really does matter, kind of thing.
I think a lot of that came out of the conflicts that were going on that we probably have no idea about between like Cody. I think the sports like stuff was coming more from Cody.
Right.
And then you had the Kenny Omega camp of why can't I wrestle a 10-year-old girl, and things like that.
Right.
And I think Tony Khan wound up leaning towards the Omega side, but you still have the remnants of the Cody influence still going on. But, another thing with the refs, like the AEW refs, if you notice, like they have no purpose to be there. Like they don't, all they do is count, especially in tag team matches. There's no tags, don't matter. Double team as long as you want. You can tag from anywhere. You could be standing outside on the floor and you can tag into a match.
Yeah.
It's madness. And what I hate, what drives me so nuts is the referees, all they do is just look concerned, right? They're very concerned and they're begging, like, please don't do that. Come on. And that even happens sometimes in WWE. Like guy, it's almost like an ineffective parent.
Yeah.
Where they're just like, guys, please, come on, guys, please. Whereas a referee should be like, get down now. 1, 2, I will throw your ass out. Like right in your face. Like, get up, get in this ring. Like Earl Hebner, right? I mean,
yeah.
God, he was like, don't mess with me, and they knew it, and they got, and I don't care if he was this big, they still respected that man. And they also, the referees were like, you're supposed to be this hardened arbiter. You've seen it all, right? You're no nonsense. There's nothing I hate worse than a referee who facially sells the moves. Like, are you that shocked that a guy did a suplex? You're a referee.
I was going to say, you'll never see Tommy Young jump for a superplex. Like,
right? They'll do like, oh my god, but like, you're the ref. Come on, man. Like, yeah, I know it looks really rough, but that's your job, right? A really good ref. It's just, and I'm not saying you can't, contribute to the match, because guys like
Sure.
Tommy Young did, and Earl Hebner, and they were part of the match. But you've seen it all. Like, this doesn't bother you or upset you. Like, you're the referee. You're supposed to be calm, cool, and collected. And not be like squeamish. They're squeamish in the ring. And they're being told to do that. Clearly, it's just a strange thing. And it's one of those things where, to tie it back to what we were saying, like, the job of the referee can go so far towards selling the product and ruining the product. It's such an important job.
I mean, I always remember how, and it always seemed to be Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby Heenan at that specific time would always say, oh, you don't touch a referee, he's going to get a fine for that, he's going to get a fine for that, and there was always this kind of like, all right, obviously, like you say, we suspend our disbelief and we know that it's kind of thingy, but chucking around referees, ref bumps, and that kind of thing never really used to happen.
I remember Monsoon. You mentioned Monsoon. Like, I was watching an old MSG. Oh, I've seen this a couple of times, but where Monsoon's the announcer, and Monsoon would, like, if a referee did something wrong, he would pick it out. And you knew that guy was going to get chewed out in the locker room later, because you could just tell he was legitimately pissed. Like, why is this referee doing that? And I remember one time Monsoon got pissed because the referee left the ring before the wrestlers. Now think about that. We wouldn't even think about that today. The referees like run away from the ring so the guy could talk for like 25 minutes. But the fact that you're the referee, you're supposed to be the first one in the ring for the match and the last one to leave. When the match ends, you raise the guy's hand, the loser leaves, then the winner leaves, and then you, the ref, you leave. You don't just walk out of the ring and just leave the guys in the ring. Like, that was such a taboo thing that he called it out on TV. Nowadays, nobody would even notice that happened. You know?
Insane. That's crazy. You know,
Yeah.
it is.
We did notice it more when we went to the next wrestling show after we spoke to Marty. Like, we were sort of like, you kept your eye on the ref. It was, and we did pick up on a few things here and there. Like, it was a really like interesting sort of way to look at it.
I wrote a column about this AEW referee problem for PWI a few months ago. And what I said, and I'll say it again here, like, I can't really blame the refs themselves. I know they're being told to do this. They're being trained a certain way. They're being told this is what we want you to do and not do. So I blame the people that are telling them that, because they're just doing their job. They're doing what they're told, just like the guys back then were doing what they were told to do. You know, it's just somebody needs to understand what the referee's role is supposed to be. That's all.
It's funny because we do have this kind of we spoke about the kind of gang type nature of fans now, where they're kind of, you know, pro WWE or anti AEW, or pro AEW and anti WWE. And I think it is kind of, you can see it in the products as well, because it did seem like AEW were kind of trying to be everything WWE wasn't, you know, and giving that kind of niche audience. And this is why I think the Wrestling Observer gets bundled in with AEW, because AEW does seem to be pandering more to that specific type audience to say, look, we're not going to fucking insult your intelligence. We know that you know this is fake. We've got the Bucks who are going to tell you in their Twitter handles how much they're exposing the business, and that you know that they're exposing it, and you think that's great. So I think that's why this kind of duality in the business is being seen, because AEW is kind of pandering more to that side of it, and WWE is trying a little bit harder to kind of, and not that kayfabe is still here, but they're kind of trying it. But then you listen to Stone Cold Steve Austin, and they're still talking about stuff on the fucking Broken Skull Ranch that completely kills kayfabe.
But that's not during the show. So that's
sure.
It's, you know, it's not happening during the show.
Sure.
WWE has in their presentation, there's just more discipline. That's one thing they have.
Right.
There's a lot of discipline, maybe too much, some people might say, but the discipline of like, this is what you can do. This is what you can't do or say. Don't do it this way. Don't do it that way. And you don't see that in AEW. It's much more like, it's chaotic, which also has somewhat of an appeal because it's entertaining. The chaos is entertaining.
Yeah.
But sometimes it can be frustrating too. Like that part of it can be frustrating. And I think the difference, you know, AEW is catering to what the kind of things Meltzer likes and observer readers like, but it's the kind of things Meltzer has been championing for years before AEW even existed. It's like people make fun of how much he loves Japan, right? Therefore it makes it seem like he's in bed with them, but it's actually the opposite thing, where they're going, we're going to make a product that Meltzer would like. You know,
I agree 100%.
Not like what WWE is not doing that. We're going to do that. We're going to make the kind of thing that these like more hardcore fans will be into. And so it creates that. But like this tribal thing, you know, I want to say, because it's like what I was saying before, how back then we were more just like wrestling fans. You know, there was a thing of, you know, you believed your wrestling maybe was better, or you liked a certain kind, and you would say, well, WWF is way better than the NWA, like, or vice versa, or this wrestling is way better. But the difference was, you weren't rooting for one company or another to beat the other company. Like, the only people who cared about that kind of shit were the people in the business. The people in the companies cared. But if you're a fan, you might say, yeah, I like this wrestling better than that wrestling, but like, I'm not rooting for this one to win and beat that one. Like, I don't care about that. Like, I'm probably going to watch everything. And if I don't like it, I'm not going to watch it. But I'm not like rooting for companies. That's weird. Rooting for a company is weird to me.
I mean, the biggest thing in wrestling happened when people thought that two companies were kind of coming together, whether it was a conflict or not. You know, when the NWO came in, it was like, you know, both companies in the same company kind of thing. It was that illusion that there was some conflict, but this is cool, you know. It's
and then that might be the beginning actually of that kind of thinking of like it was a very meta storyline, especially at the time. It was something. Now it's sort of like you don't think twice because it's like so much of wrestling was influenced by that era.
Yeah.
But at the time, this idea of like, I remember a time when they wouldn't even call it a company on the air. It was, you know, they never would use the word company because they wanted you to think it was like a sports league or like a governing body or, you know, some kind of sports entity. They would never call it a company. So the fact that they were acknowledging this is a corporate company, this is an entertainment entity, we're being invaded by a different company that's trying to take us over. Like that was such an outside the box idea because all the angles were just about personal issues between the wrestlers. It was nothing about like, oh, wow, now all the wrestlers have to join forces to fight against this outside force. Like that was taking the reality of the business that only insiders cared about. And it was now creating a storyline that fans would care about. And, you know, that might be the beginning of this idea of tribalism, of people taking that concept and just blowing it way out of proportion.
I mean,
that is a fascinating way to put it.
It's great, isn't it?
Yeah. Like,
I mean, I still do enjoy the memes of a picture of Vince McMahon with the reddest face looking angry. And it says, Vince McMahon, when Cody Rhodes mentioned belts and wrestlers. And it's just, you know, like Vince's red face. I still enjoy the memes. You know, so moving on from that, though. So you've got your book coming out. It's already out. April 2022, it came out. The book about the original Sheik. So where can people get it? Talk about your podcast a little bit more and talk about maybe some stuff that you're looking to do in the future.
Sure. So the book, there was a little bit of a distribution issue with the book. I want to point that out because people were getting frustrated, and I understand that. There was not an expectation of the kind of demand that there would be for this book. And Amazon and other online outlets, I don't think they ordered enough copies right away. So a lot of the pre-orders didn't even get fully fulfilled. And Amazon, as we speak right now, is out of stock. Now, I've been told, now, let me just say, if you want to get a Kindle copy or a digital PDF copy, they're never going to sell out. You can get those from Amazon. You can get it from barnesandnoble.com or any other online outlet. The issues are with the physical copies of the book. If that's what you're looking for, you will either you'll have to maybe wait a couple of weeks till Amazon
not here
gets
in the
there.
UK. You can get it tomorrow on Prime if you really want it.
Can you really?
You can, yeah. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, you can get it. It's in stock.
Oh my God. The Americans are going to hate me even more. Now, wait. Scroll down a little bit there because make sure it doesn't say temporarily out of stock. What does it say?
Oh, we're still in the pre-order phase.
Okay.
That's my bad.
Weird.
No, it's not released in the UK until June.
God, I hope that doesn't happen here too.
Well, apologies. Yeah, sorry, UK fans, you have to wait a little bit longer.
Is it? I don't know how this works. Is it possible for people in the UK to kind of cheat by ordering from from the American Amazon? Like
VPNs, baby. There might be VPNs that people can use and get it. But
so I guess people in the UK will have to wait. But in a way, that could be a good thing because I'm hoping by that point they get these supply chain issues straightened out. Because in the meantime, though, I will say that you can do two things. Even in the UK, I think you could do this now. ECW Press, you can order directly from them. Of course, there's shipping with that, because they're a Canadian company, so it's probably going to cost about $20 or so just the shipping alone. Now, I also have a limited supply of my own copies that I'm signing and selling, and I have sold to people in the UK. It costs a little bit more because I'm shipping from the US and it has to cover the shipping, because if I paid for all the shipping, I'd go broke. Sure. But people can reach out to me if they want to order signed printed copies from me. My email is brianrsolomon@yahoo.com if people want to reach out. I do have them. Also, the podcast too, I've been talking a lot about it on there. It's Shut Up and Wrestle, and there's a website, suawpod.com. That's the Shut Up and Wrestle website. But you can get it on Google Podcast, Podcast Addict, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, I think is probably where most people find it. It's everywhere. I just started up a Facebook group for the podcast. So if you look up Shut Up and Wrestle with Brian R. Solomon on Facebook, you'll find the Facebook group.
We'll
if you
smash a link in there. Don't worry about that.
Yeah.
We'll make sure.
There you go. There you go. And so, I'm up to episode 13 now coming up. I'm very excited about the show. It's been great response.
One last question. It seems like you're quite close with Brian Larson, Camp Cornette, and you're obviously you've spoken quite nicely and friendly about Dave Meltzer. Could you be the intermediary that gets them to shake hands?
Oh, I would love to. I really would. I would love to be. I don't know if you guys would get the reference, but in the US, we had a comedy team called Martin and Lewis back in the day. It was Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis.
Yeah.
And they were great. And then they broke up and hated each other for years. And Frank Sinatra was friends with both of them. And he got them back together in a surprise on the air on live television. He surprised them. And it's a very famous thing here in America. I would love to be the Frank Sinatra to Meltzer and Cornette's Martin and Lewis in a second. I don't think I have that power, unfortunately, because this is the thing. I'm not the only one here. I love and respect both of those guys, and I think they're both very valuable.
Yeah.
And it makes me sad that they don't get along. I even said to Brian once, I think I said it, where it's like being a kid and watching your mommy and daddy argue. And you're so sad to please don't fight, mommy and daddy. Please don't fight. I would, because they used to be friends. It's too bad,
They're more similar than they want to fucking admit as well, I think. But like Dave Meltzer and Cornette, they both love wrestling to the nth degree. They're both historians of the business. They're both, been around for a long, long time. And yeah, I mean, man, if we could bring those two together, if you could do that, that would be incredible.
They both like what they like. That's the thing. And I think, Meltzer, I think, is maybe trying more to kind of change and move along with new things. Whereas Cornette, I think, is trying to be more critical and critique things and point out how the way things were done, maybe could be learned from a little bit more than it is being today.
Yeah.
And those are two very different philosophies. They both love old school wrestling, but they do have very different philosophies, especially when it comes to modern wrestling. And it's very hard to reconcile. It's just going to have to be a point. The only way it would ever happen is if they both just agreed to disagree. They're not going to change each other's mind. They just have to say, you know what? You think very differently about this than I do, and I don't care. You just keep thinking that way, and we'll leave it aside. That's the only way it'll ever happen.
And then they can both walk off into the sunset and go to Dairy Queen and be happy.
That would be amazing. They would get a great reality show. Could you imagine?
Oh shit, man!
Dave and Jim.
Uncle Dave and Jim.
They'll get a great reaction at a live wrestling show, just coming out and shaking hands. I mean,
there's a much better chance of that than Jim making friends with Vince Russo. That's for sure. I mean, I could actually see Meltzer, and because the difference there is, I think that deep down, they both still respect each other.
Sure.
Dave Meltzer and Jim Cornette. I don't believe that's the case with Jim Cornette and Vince Russo at all. But Jim and Dave do, and it's just a matter of putting things aside. I don't know. I would love to see it happen. On live TV, that would be even better.
Man,
I would love to see. I would love to see Jim in AEW. Can you imagine? I mean, God, I can't be the only one to think that.
I've said that on the show. I think if they hired Jim Cornette, he would be able to as long as they could turn around and say, look, Jim, fuck off every now and again, just leave us to this. But
Right.
if they were able to just take some of the stuff on board, I mean, we want AEW to be successful. We've said this. We don't want them to fail. Like, we 100% don't want them to fail. I mean, I buy their merchandise. I mean, MJF, I think, is someone that could be absolutely huge in the future. You know, if they could, if Jim Cornette could work in some relationship with them, because AEW's got some great legends that behind the scenes. They've got Double A, they've got, you know, the Jake the Snake Robertses, they've got the people, the old school guys, but it just seems like their influence may be limited. What do you think?
I also think that Tony Khan is a big fan of Jim Cornette. I really do think that. I think that he listens to the show. I firmly have always believed that, and I think that he actually probably takes notes and certain ideas and things, because he's a very valuable insight. I understand he rubs some people the wrong way, and you know, being from New York, I can sympathize how sometimes you can rub people the wrong way, and it doesn't take away from your value, though. That's the thing. I would love to see him over there. I don't, you know, he's just not motivated because he can afford not to do any of these things. You know, it would be awesome. I think, I mean, this isn't really a huge stretch, but I think the reason Dan Lambert exists is it's sort of this clumsy and not totally successful way of them trying to replicate Jim Cornette in AEW. I think, I mean, you can almost imagine Cornette just being dropped in place of Dan Lambert in almost any segment that he's in, and just probably doing it like 1,000 times better too.
I'd agree. Yeah, I think whilst Lambert has some value, I think it can be quite sloppy and clumsy at times, and it's almost like you've picked a poor substitution for Jim and just said, let's try. Let's see if we can get some of that Jim heat. But it's
the first time he got in the ring, Lambert, and he's talking about, you know, modern wrestling, and then he's championship wrestling from Florida, and Jack Briscoe and Dory Funk Jr. The first thing I thought of, this could be taken right out of Jim Cornette's mouth and put into someone else's mouth, you know?
I mean, Jim Cornette has been a lot more receptive to AEW recently, though. He has accepted that things have been improving in certain areas. He sometimes still does lose his shit over certain stuff, which is that's just Cornette. But he's warming up to him. Yeah,
I think I think he's just being honest. And again, he's another person. There's no axe to grind. There's no agenda. He just honestly doesn't like most of the things he sees them doing, and when he sees something he really likes, he says it. You know, he's not like trying to bury them or anything. He's just giving his honest opinion in his own way that he does it. And when he sees something he likes, he's not going to be afraid to say it. He's not going to begrudge them. You know, he praised that Young Bucks and FTR match. I mean, a Young Bucks match, and he's raving about it because he genuinely enjoyed it. That's all. It's one man's opinion.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if he'll ever get on with Miro, but that's and that's probably another story in itself.
Oh, Miro, did you say?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think, I mean, honestly, I didn't think anybody would say that. Miro's invisible now. I don't know what happened, but he was compared to what they were doing to what they originally were doing when he came in, I thought was a huge improvement, where he went from being the video game guy for no reason to being like a monster. I loved all the stuff with God's champion or whatever he was calling himself. That was
the Redeemer.
He was one of the best things they had going, honestly. I don't know. Did he get hurt or something? Did I miss something? Maybe I'm out of the
I thought he got hurt in a match with possibly Danielson.
Okay, because he's been I think nowhere.
It looked like he got hurt because the finish, like in that match, just was a bit off to me, like just from what I was watching. But and then we haven't really seen him since. And
I have a feeling when he comes back, it'll be with his wife, because they were clearly building towards that. I mean, they kept mentioning, her as an unnamed, character. Basically, you feel like they're probably going to try to replicate the Miro and Lana thing a little bit, or whatever they're going to call her, you know.
I mean, why not, man? If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, no. It did work. WWE never should have. Man, I mean, they talking about dropping the ball. I mean, they also had something special with him, and they turned him into a goofball. I mean, not that there is no room for comedy in wrestling. There is. There certainly is. But there's certain things that shouldn't be comedy. You know, you take somebody who has a lot of value as a monster heel, and then you make him a goofball, and that's probably not a good idea.
Man, there's always a space for comedy in wrestling. We had Santino Marella on the show. He was our first interview, Anthony Corelli, and he's just, you know, a fantastic character. You know, I mean, even to a point, I love Danhausen. A lot of people don't like him, or they rub him, that, you know, he rubs them up the wrong way or whatever. But I watch his YouTube channel and stuff as well. But yeah, I mean, Danhausen as a character, I think has got a place definitely for comic relief in wrestling, but has to be done right, I think, you know.
Yeah, it has to be done right. That's the thing. Like, I was very skeptical about Orange Cassidy when he first came in, but I was won over for sure. Like, I think he's one of the best things they have going. And one of the, because at first I was thinking, well, what could they really do with this guy? So his whole gimmick is he doesn't care about anything. He doesn't put in an effort. All right, that's funny a couple of times, but where do you go with that? You know, and so I think one of the smartest things they ever did, and I honestly don't know if he was doing this before AEW. I wasn't following that closely, but the whole idea that he eventually can be made to care, like he eventually loses his cool if you push him far enough, and then he will kick your ass. Like, that's great, and that is what has given him legs in AEW. And I think, to me, with Danhausen, I don't think I've seen enough to be able to judge, because I'm going like the same thing. Like, what do you do with this guy after a few weeks? Like, he comes out, he's going to put a curse on somebody, he says something funny, but like, where do you go with that? Who does he actually wrestle? Does he wrestle? Do you put a title on him? Like, what is the end game? So I need to see a little bit more before I decide with the Danhausen thing.
Well, this is where me and Chris disagree. I'm not a fan of Danhausen gimmick character. I've called him the modern day Papa Shango more than once. Like, it's like, yeah, it just doesn't.
Papa Shango was not played for laughs, even if people may have been laughing.
Yeah. Correct.
He was supposed to be serious and scary. Danhausen is totally played for laughs, you know.
Well, he had a broken leg. This is the thing. I don't think he's been fully cleared to wrestle yet. You know, he broke his leg in an indie promotion, and then he was going to A&W and filling out application forms and stuff. Like, the whole journey of him getting into AEW has kind of been played out on Twitter and on YouTube. So they've been building that up, like you say, the way people digest wrestling and the way people digest certain storylines is different now. You know, it's not all been done on TV. A lot of it has been done through social media and stuff like that, you know, through Twitter and through YouTube channels. You know, there's a lot of that going on.
Right. Like, somebody I love right now is RJ City. I think he is a genius. And he was somebody that I've never seen him wrestle even for 2 seconds in my entire life. Never. I don't know who he wrestled, where he wrestled. I see him on Twitter. He made, before he even got hooked up with AEW, he was doing these short films and things that were hilarious and incredibly clever. And then Tony Khan noticed, and now he's doing these, I don't know if you know who I'm talking about, but he's doing these little interviews with AEW wrestlers and things, like trying to break them out of character. Like, and it's hilarious. And I don't even know if he's ever going to wrestle ever, but like, he's created this following on Twitter. It's this strange time where wrestlers can make something of themselves in these very unconventional, unorthodox ways, you know. Like, he got a job, he got a gig with AEW just from doing that, and he's never even, I don't even know if Tony Khan has ever seen him have a match. That's so weird, but he's great. I want to try to get him on my podcast.
Man, do it. I mean, that would be incredible. I mean, I think, Brian, we could probably talk to you for fucking hours about everything to do with wrestling, and we would absolutely love it. And you know, maybe
round 2, maybe.
Maybe round 2 at some point when the book. So at the moment, let me just refer to. So at the
2nd
moment,
of June, I think it said in.
It's saying
in the
June,
UK.
yeah. So the 2nd of
Okay.
June, 2022, you'll be able to buy this in the UK on Amazon.
I'm not sure if the Kindle option is available now. It's not saying June for Kindle, but
No, Kindle you can buy now. So
Yeah.
you can
There
buy
you
the
go.
Kindle. Yeah. So it is called Blood and Fire, the unbelievable real life story of wrestling's original Sheik by our man, Brian R. Solomon. And it's been an absolute pleasure having you on, Brian. You know, we don't want to take up any more of your Sunday afternoon. It's just, you know, it's great to talk to somebody you've got such a depth of knowledge about wrestling. You know, you've worked in different areas of it, and so now you're kind of like a civvy. You're in just kind of normal life and just doing this just for the pure love of it, right?
Yeah, and I've been more involved than I have in many years because, you know, with the pandemic and everything, I've been like sort of refocusing and having a lot more time on my hands. And I've been more involved in wrestling stuff in the last 2 years, I would say, than I have been since I worked for WWE, for sure.
Wow. Incredible.
That's great.
Yeah,
That's
been a blast.
Good. Yeah. So
thank you guys.
Thank you so much, Brian, for being with us. It's been a blast. Yeah. If we ever get a chance to do round 2, it would be fantastic. Also, if you're in the UK, you know, hit us up. We'll have some tea. We'll have some laughs. We'll keep another conversation going.
I'd love to. I write for Inside the Ropes too. So speaking of Power Slam,
yeah, we had a bit featured on Inside the Ropes as well.
Yeah,
a little while ago.
So maybe if I come out and visit Kenny and Dante and those guys, maybe I'll come and say hi to you too.
Brilliant. So check out Brian's podcast. It is Shut Up and Wrestle. You can find that. Where can I get that? On any podcast platforms, pretty much. Do you have a YouTube clips or anything like that? Anything on YouTube?
That is in the works. I'm planning to start a YouTube channel soon, but it's not there yet. I wanted to have like a nice bank of episodes before I started doing that.
Sure.
Like I didn't want to just put all the work in and find out like 4 people were listening, you know? So
Sure.
like, I'm probably going to start doing that very soon, but there is, like I mentioned before, I just started up a Facebook group to sort of try to create kind of a community around the show. Cause I notice a lot of podcasts have that, where people can talk about the show and talk about the guests, and where I could be like, hey, you know that match we were talking about on last week's episode? Here it is. Here's a clip. You can watch it. Like that kind of thing. And that's brand new on Facebook. It's a group. It's just called Shut Up and Wrestle with Brian R. Solomon.
Amazing. Link in the description, guys.
Absolutely.
So again, thank you to Brian R. Solomon. Blood and Fire, the unbelievable real life story of wrestling's original Sheik. He's got loads of other books out there as well. So you can get it on Kindle at the minute. The paperback will be out. But yeah, we just want to thank you again, Brian, for coming on. It's been incredible, man.
It's been my pleasure. I could talk about this stuff forever, as you can see. So I never get tired. So thank you.
No worries, man. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian, so much. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
And there you have it.
That's
Ladies
right.
and gentlemen, thank you so much to Brian for coming on. That was, I mean, we were supposed to just be talking about the book. It turned into something completely different. It was an amazing chat with Brian there. He's a very knowledgeable man, and in terms of his wrestling, he was really into it.
Again, we start the interview and then we say to him, you know, Jordan's like, yeah, so how long do you reckon you'll be on, you know? And he's like, well, how long do you usually do? And we're like, you know, we aim to do like an hour or so. 2.5 hours later, we're still like talking. We have to like rein it in. But again, like you're saying, man, he you know, someone who loves the wrestling business, has been around the business.
Yes, yeah.
You know, it's obvious, you know, he loves the business, and, you know, he's got a lot to say about a lot. You know, he's got no axes to grind with anyone. He's, you know, a fan of Meltzer, a fan of Cornette. You know, it's refreshing.
The first fan of Meltzer we've come across.
Yeah.
Across any of our interviews. So that's a I mean, the gold stars right there. So
but you know, also maybe you know, maybe I might start reading the fucking Observer, dude, because, you know, who knows what, because he's, you know, Brian's right. I don't read the Observer.
No, we don't.
We don't read it. All we see of what comes out of, Dave Meltzer is what he puts on Twitter. That's all. That is all we see. So whether we're taking it out of context or we're not seeing the big picture, who fucking knows, man? And maybe I will start reading the Wrestling Observer and then we'll see what happens. Maybe we will have a Chat Grapple and Cheat Pops newsletter. What do you reckon?
Yeah, 8 stars all around.
Fucking 8 stars, baby. 8.5. Why not?
So yeah, thank you so much for sticking with us, listening to us. And Brian, definitely go and check out his book. I can't wait to read it.
Check out his book, check out his podcast. He's had people like RVD on, he's got links in the businessman, he knows. He was the guy that was editing the WWE magazine from about 2000 to 2007. Fucking A, man. Not a lightweight, not a lightweight by any stretch.
Absolutely not. So if you are listening, thank you so much for listening. If you're watching, you know what to do by now. If you haven't done it, why the fuck not? You can see who we're getting on the show. You can see exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
We are getting some of and they might not, you might say, oh, they're not the biggest names. They're some of the fucking best.
100%, dude. Brian is like a hidden gem.
Absolutely.
In the wrestling business, you in all the other podcasts that are out there, you can pay to have your superstars on, but we are looking for those diamonds in the rough that is wrestling media, and we found one today. It was great to have him on, Mr. Brian R. Solomon. Check out his book about the Sheik. Check out to be honest, mate, I'm probably going to get that trivia book as well. It looks fucking interesting, man.
If you end up buying a book about trains, it's the wrong Brian, just so you know.
Right. So yeah.
But yeah, we will be back soon with something else. We've got a few things working, as we have had a little break. We have noticed that we have to take a break every now and again. Things change in personal lives, but here we are. We will see you soon enough with something similar, different, maybe a Halloween Havoc 95. Who knows?
That's what we could quite easily do that, and this is how we work on this show. We've got no itinerary, really. We talk about something like we've just spoke about with Brian there, talking about Sabu, we're talking about the original Sheik. Fuck it, man. Next thing we do, maybe that WCW.
We do need to very briefly make a quick shout out to my mother. She turned up on my birthday with a TV VHS combo machine and I can't reach it from here where I'm in the chair, but a Hasbro Dusty Road. So
an American Dream. He got the American Dream Dusty Road.
Sought after piece of kit.
Trust me, baby.
The dream. The dream
Trust
is
me,
home.
Daddy.
Is what I tagged it as. Yeah, the dream is home.
The dream's home.
So yeah, my VHS collection is back on the shelves. So we are going to get right back into our retro shit.
That's bro, fucking A, man. I mean, we between us, we have got some real obscure videos as well, man. I've got some weird ones, like I've got some really strange British wrestling videos that we could probably do some reviews on that no fucker's probably ever seen.
Some old Johnny Saint matches or some shit,
Bro, I've got like some weird ones that have got some very, very strange characters and some very, very cool matches and some very big stars in their very early days. So
perfect.
Yeah.
So, thank you so much, guys, for listening to us ramble on. We will be back very soon. Thank you so much for listening, watching, subscribing, liking, doing all that stuff. Let us know what you think. Hit us up in the comments. Tell us if you want to hear from, if you want us to try and hook us up with someone else and talk to someone else. Let us know if you want us to review a show. We'll do whatever you guys want. We're just two J bros doing our thing.
Do you think maybe the reason why I'm warming up to Meltzer's because of the neck beard, bro? Is that?
Oh, so it is a bit necky.
It's getting a bit necky, isn't it, bro? Like, fuck, I didn't even notice. I don't look in mirrors. I don't bother. So on that note,
Yeah.
we thank Brian again. Thank you to the best co-host in all wrestling podcast, my man JB.
Oh,
And
and don't forget the best Chris in all of wrestling podcasts. And I'm going to give him a new nickname as well, Dynamite Chris Dredd.
Dynamite Chris Dredd, fucking A, man. Flying headbutts off the top turnbuckle. Let's fucking
Thank you
go.
very much, guys. Take care, everyone. We will see you soon.